What is up, y'all, and welcome to today's Theist Helpline, April 21st. But the apologetics, the topics have yet to come because we are about to get into the Discord fun. I have been running on Amy time, unfortunately, and so I'm going to do this real fast so we can jump right in there because I know that JL and Ix are already talking. And so I do want to thank everyone out there. Please don't forget to like, follow, subscribe. I said it, YouTube. There, you can let them go now. They can be free. You can also share. It always makes me laugh for whatever reason. Just like space lasers and being Soros's #1 field agent. As well as don't forget to hit that bell icon. That's what actually gives you reminders to see our premieres or join our live stream so I can say hi to all of your wonderful digital faces. Like, what is up, Judith? I hope you're having a lovely morning, afternoon, or night. And I also want to remind you that you can send in super chats and I'll be silly and interact with them, and super thanks later in the future. And I'm sending thanks to you now. There's also many fantastic we have our evolving badge system. You can tell my brain is like trying to smash things together, which seems to trigger creationists. We do a lot of evolution. I like biology, and I don't know why. Well, I set this up every time. I don't know why that having answers to the diversity of life triggers them, but of course they have their own answer, which is that boat incident, like the really big boat incident. Yeah. Anyway, also, how do you get meat eating from rain? Lots and lots of rain. You would think it'd be the Adam and Eve event, Applegate. No. Even after Applegate, all the animals were like, la, 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 la. Even the snake was like, la, 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 la. La, 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 la is what you do when you eat vegetables. Yes. And so we have our evolving badge system with our channel members, our lovely channel members, as well as our Patreons and our supporters at patreon.com/Amy Newman. I still have to do the clickety clack, even when you can't see it, but boo. What's up, Tsunami? Hope you're having a lovely morning, afternoon, or good night. I do 3 songs throughout my day. I do a good morning song with my kids, and then you do a good afternoon song and a goodbye song. I saw somewhere it said that it was good for children to like say good morning to everyone, though all the teachers do that naturally. They have like a positivity somehow that early in the morning. But yes, those supporters include, I'm going to do it fast because I want to jump right in. Sending love to Rachel Holen. So much love, Rachel. Reminding us we probably shouldn't take slaves from the nations around us. You can just go on your local.com and find one. Anyway, sending so much love to davegar, reminding us the earth is indeed round. The fact that we have to say this means that you're listening to this on the internet. Yeah, it happens. It's the Wild West right now. It's okay. Eventually, people will know what good sources are, and this epistemological nightmare will go away. But hey, there are cat videos on the internet, too. Sending so much love to Chris Disciple, reminding us that we have Christians, Muslims, Jews, Hindus, and the skeptic and ranting community. The only thing you need to do is be skeptical of beliefs. Just don't be 110% sure of anything unless it's the fact that you like mustard on a hot dog. Actually, that seems to be very divided, apparently. How you like your hot dog. How you just don't question the meat inside the hot dog, and we'll have a good time. Anyway, sending love to Azo reminding us everyone here has a place in the skeptic and ranting community. Come on down. We are basically just skeptical people and ranting, giving an alternative to, those dogmatic religious belief systems. You can be religious and still part of the skeptic and ranting community, but it is nice to, be able to think for yourself. Sometimes the free thinker label is a cop-out for certain things. I'm a free thinker. That's why I don't do vaccines. I don't know why I had to give that a Southern accent. But oftentimes, it just means going with the science. That doesn't mean we need to just challenge everything because we went to the University of Blogs. Fantastic cafeteria, though, the University of Blogs. Sending so much love to Dale Pastel. We're looking for empirical evidence. I say I go fast and I still can't even help myself. Dale Pastel, so we are sending so much love. We're looking for empirical evidence. If empirical evidence is too much, that's okay. We're probably going to spend the next few hours and arguments talking about logical ones because that's the best that they can give, which is fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong playing in philosophy land. It has gotten us far, including and up to science, which is what now dominates everything that's important. But hey, syllogisms, they go all over the place, ladies and gentlemen, and then you have to clean up later. Ian Davenport, thank you so much, Ian. We're sending so much love, reminding us that these apologetics that we're probably about to witness are, I just have your bingo cards ready. Contingency, I still stand by, is hot. But who knows? You never know when a good old Kalam could come in there. That was the hottest thing a few years ago. Or maybe they'll even defend their own beliefs. But that would be a little bit, I don't know. They know that sounds silly. And Rejo, speaking of silly beliefs, the Bible. We do a skeptic Bible study. Come on down and watch how much he either talks about, exposition, which you're not really supposed to do. But the other thing he does is murder. And so maybe exposition isn't so bad. What's up, Nerdy Rodent? What's up, y'all? And all right, I'm going to try and jump in there. And they're already talking, so I'm just going to sneak as if I am the person coming into class and trying to notice that the teacher will not. Do. Tell me, y'all, once we're in, how the sound is. And...
how do you account for intelligibility or something like that? His usual script. And I'm like, I'm like a fallibilist, critical rationalist. So I would say that anyone who claims to have a foundationalist surety of anything is wrong. That it's impossible to have such, and that the best we can do is to admit that the problem of induction is real, that we're always inductively inferring things with the possibility of being wrong, and that what Popper was trying to do with the idea of critical rationalism and falsification is just admit that this is true, but just do science anyway, by adding a deductive element, which is the part where you eliminate theories conclusively with death blow falsification. And you don't claim that the inference supporting a theory is proof that it's proven. You kind of get rid of the word proven, and instead of the concept of this is proven, you have the concept of this withstood falsification attempts, where falsification is now the first goal of a scientific theory, is to prove that it is a falsifiable theory, and then to attempt to falsify it rigorously. So I said, look, if your worldview has no rigorous error elimination as its basis, and if you're just claiming, like Descartes, you have some foundational bullshit that you think kind of justifies everything else, then I have no interest in it. It sounds like the worst, most epistemically unhumble worldview you could possibly have, and it's the most likely to produce errors, and it's going to be totally decoupled from empirical reality or able to predict or model or say anything meaningful about empirical reality. And then he was like, oh, I have to go. I'll talk to you later. It was very nice talking. And he just left.
Wow.
He just left. And he didn't even get mad or like try to fight, really. He just he was like, oh, this is not one of the people that I like to talk to.
Oh, what a dishonest shit. I'm sorry. It's just like, although I'm amazed that you had a cordial discussion with him.
Well, he did bring up Kuhn. He tried to say, oh yeah, well,
right,
Popper was wrong because, Kuhn showed that, like you'll never ever get enough falsification to know anything for sure. And so you can't know anything. So knowledge is impossible under falsificationism or whatever. So, Kuhn just showed that it's just one revolution after another and it's all just a house of cards and science doesn't know anything. And I'm just like, yeah, Kuhn didn't repudiate Popper. Kuhn added to Popper in the same way that like quantum physics doesn't get rid of Newtonian physics. It just shows how Newtonian physics works more accurately for the edge cases that Newtonian physics doesn't quite work for, right? You can still do Newtonian physics for the motion of the planets and all kinds of things, and it still accurately predicts all that stuff. So extending a scientific theory through a scientific revolution is not falsifying falsificationism. It's just it's like the theory of natural selection, the modern synthesis, right? We learn all the different mechanisms. We have horizontal gene transfer and all these other things besides the descendant mutation. We have all these other kinds of mutation that happen, and that all gets added into the model. So,
yeah.
And so, yeah, also, he tried. It was a good conversation. I actually had a nice conversation with him. That was the weird thing, right?
That's crazy. That's wild. But it can happen. I guess a broken watch is right twice a day, I guess. And welcome, Amy Newman.
Hey, Amy.
Woo-hoo, how are you guys?
Amy's bringing love.
That indeed I am.
I'm doing good.
Good to see you. Good to see you, Amy. Thanks so much for popping up. I said there were 40. It said in the deal that there were 40 people interested in the stage, and I was looking forward to how many people would pop in here. But apparently, there was some sort of issue. I guess with Discord, Taco was dealing with it, and with the events. And so we don't have that much of an audience right now. No one's put their hand up yet to have a conversation. So we're pretty much just, X and I have just been, like killing time and catching up because it's been a minute since I've seen him. I do want to bring this up. Let me see. Oh, Jefferson Spatchcock would like to say, X crush Gary in a gentle way, of course.
Thanks.
And I do want to say hello, Tux TV. Hello, I Killed Earl. Good to see you. Thanks so much for being here. John Fabiano as well. Good to see you. Lord Dissident. There's a guy in my live chat, the Dusty Underground, who's been arguing like this and ultimately just kind of like boiled this stuff down to an appeal to consequence. He's like, I have my faith. You have nothing but darkness. And so, guys, so Dusty Underground, the link to the politics server is in the description of this video. It's the politics server. Yeah, I mean, it's right there at the bottom. You should be able to see it. I've got it like set where it's very, very obvious. So if you want to come up on, come over to the Discord server, join the Discord server, come up on stage. We'd be more than happy to chat with you about the things that you are getting really, really wrong in my live chat. So, because all you're doing is straw manning. So, yeah, if you want to have that conversation, we're more than happy to have it with you. Okay, so if you want to, or I don't want to be that kind of guy who's like, if you can, but yeah, you're more than welcome. And welcome, Joshua Lee. Good to see you as well. Thank you so much. And to the scam people we have in the audience, I see a lot of names that I recognize. Andrew, mathematician, Lol said, good to see you, Dr. Nimrod, as well. I hope your audio is sorted out. Hopefully, we will get some people who want to put their hands up and have a conversation about some of these various things, about what they believe and why, because we'd like to explore these topics. These are important. So if you're in the audience, feel free to put your hand up if you'd like to come up on stage. Whether you're a theist, obviously we want to kind of put the emphasis on believers, people who believe in things like God or gods or whatever. We'd like to talk with them. We'd like to prioritize them. But if you are an atheist and you have something you'd like to talk about, something going on, or have a question, we'd love to talk to you as well. So definitely. I do have a question for both of you, being that Amy, you're more present on YouTube and X. I'm not sure the extent of your social media like, or how hard you're pressing into that field. But I'm curious your thoughts or opinions on this whole ban or this potential ban that has gone through the House recently.
Which ban?
The TikTok ban.
Oh, I'm pretty
no,
paranoid
you go
about
for
China.
it.
My TLDR is I'm very suspicious of China and TikTok. I think that the threat is quite real. They had a bunch of journalists exposing how they were misusing people's data in a way that is very, very dangerous. And their response to that was to misuse data, personal data of the journalists, to personally harass the journalists, which is kind of proving the journalists right. So,
right.
Yeah.
What about you, Amy?
So I'm conflicted because I guess I actually think what Ix is saying as well. And yet I understand that medium is probably going to have to exist somehow. There's a reason that YouTube's trying to like lean into shorts because it means that type of video content, I guess, is just what this generation is into.
Right.
So the question is TikTok possibly an evil organization? Probably. Is that content going to be what probably content that's going to be consumed is going to be as well in the future? Probably. So I'm not sure. It's kind of a conundrum.
Yeah, I've enjoyed the TikTok short style content that's mixed into my YouTube feeds. I don't use the TikTok app, but I enjoy the format because it's like an advertisement. Like, think about it this way: ads have always been a thing, and when you have content, you make ads about your content to let new people who don't know about your content see a quick, 10-second, 15-second, 30-second. Hey, come check out my content. If you haven't seen it before, here's what it's all about. Have a good day. Like, that idea that you just give people a quick shout out to tell people what you're doing is kind of what commerce runs on, right? Because people don't know what products or services exist. They don't know what channels and movies and things to watch. And so, as much as we hate ads, we kind of find them useful to a degree, right? Like, people do discover things through ads that do help them from time to time. And so I don't think the short format is bad in the sense that it lets a person who has long form content take little clips out of their long form content and then stick it on there. So I love a few people in the sort of atheist and rational sphere who have shorts that are just clips from their content, but it lets me know to go watch the rest of it, and I really like that. The one thing I'll say, yeah, go ahead.
Oh well, I just want to say. This may be a topic that hit a interesting bone because we got hands that came up, so we could probably start to raise people. But I also just want to add one more thing, just in case any interested people are out there. As much as I'm sending everybody love, God does not exist. So feel free to come on and, tell us why he does.
There you go. Poke the bear. Poke the bear. All right. So the first person with their hand up was Reverse Camus. I've spoken with Reverse past. Reverse is a pretty good dude. So Reverse, come on up. Let's bring you up to the stage. Hey, Reverse, how's it going? Might want to check your mic. You're not muted on our end.
Hardware mute switch, software mute switch. Push to talk. Something is interfering with your audio coming through.
What's up, Victoria? What's up, Spooky? And everybody. Richard. Whoever I haven't missed.
Are you good, Reverse? We may have to come back to you.
We could leave him up just until his audio works and pull someone else up as well, just so he can let us know as soon as the audio is working. So just keep trying to fix your audio, Reverse, and as soon as it does, we'll take note. But we could talk to maybe, was it Mathematician was next?
Yeah, I think so. Let me go ahead and actually, just for the sake of the stage, everything. So Reverse, I'm going to go ahead and put you back down to the audience. Just put your hand back up when you think you got your audio taken care of, and then we'll try to bring you back up. Okay. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's bring up Mathematician. It's always fun talking with Math. How's it going, bud?
Hey JL, how you doing?
Doing good, sir. How you doing on this lovely Sunday morning?
Pretty good. Still recovering for my 420 yesterday.
There you go. So what you got for us today?
Well, I was just gonna say I use TikTok all the time. I highly recommend it. I think in these
Oh, he's a
final
Chinese
hours,
spy. Get rid of him.
yeah,
No,
true.
I kid.
Paid chill. I confess. But TikTok's amazing. I think it's a great app. I think if you haven't tried it, it's really good. Darth Dawkins is on there. he gets schooled by schlubs on TikTok as well.
Yeah,
But,
I've seen him. He thinks that Discord is bad and Clubhouse is bad. I was just thinking he is going to have a hell on TikTok. And I think it's hilarious because I know that a number of us, I don't know if it's the same for Ix and Amy, but I know that both Jefferson Spatchcock and I got insta-banned by his little friends. It's kind of like they knew we were there and just like, bam. So now I can't even see his channel on TikTok unless I'm not signed in. If I sign into TikTok, it's invisible to me. So like he shut us down insta.
I had one interaction with him, and I said, I'm going to leave in 30 minutes. And at the 30-minute mark, as I was speaking to say goodbye, he kicked me.
Wow.
I have a question.
Anyways, yeah, I just wanted to. Oh yeah, go ahead.
I've enjoyed some other people in the sort of debatosphere who are on TikTok. I think, although he does YouTube shorts, Danny Phil Talk Danny.
I don't. No.
He's got a really good channel where he talks to people, and he does live stages where he just lets people come up and talks to them, much like our show, but on a short. I think it's on both TikTok and YouTube Shorts, and it's Danny Phil
How do you
Talk.
spell his name?
Channel. Danny Phil Talk, and he's a very long time member of this community. When I met him, he was a Christian, and one of the most fascinating things about his perspective that really strengthens his ability to communicate with Christians is that he was a Christian for a long time in this community, and then he, through conversations with all sorts of people in it, and myself included, I don't think I said anything that persuasive to him, but like I had a conversation with him, for instance, about the empty tomb and the inconsistencies between all the tomb accounts of angels, no angels, tomb is open, tomb is closed. The angels terrified people, or the angels met them at the front door and were polite and nice and not scary. We went through it and talked about, are these contradictions? Are these just inconsistencies? How do you account for that stuff? If the Bible is true, why is it so discrepancied, whether you call it a contradiction or just a discrepancy? And so he was like the kind of Christian that you would love to talk to and that you wish most Christians were like, because he was super reasonable. And the dude is very philosophically versed. He teaches philosophy. So now when he talks to Christians, he's like, yeah, I used to believe the same stuff. Yeah, and like I didn't understand this, and here's what you need to understand. And like it helps that I had philosophy training, so I actually understood it when it was explained to me. And once it was explained to me, you just can't go back. Like the problem of evil goes through. He talks a lot about the Trinity being just logically impossible. He talks about a lot of these core things that are technical arguments that are not that easy for the average layperson to fully appreciate how persuasive they are, how there's just no logical way that these concepts work. And it's fun. So the format is good because it lets you do these like live streams and conversations as well as the quick little videos. The question is, why do we need to have the Chinese Communist Party directly control an app which completely abuses everyone's phone and has tendrils into absolutely every part of your phone? They absolutely do. They absolutely do.
How do you figure?
So it's the case that Chinese companies are essentially extensions of the Chinese state. They don't have the same kind of capitalism that other countries have. So in China, do you remember Baidu? Big, fast growing. That's like the Google of China, basically, right? The CEO of Baidu made one comment that he thought that the inflation rates or the interest rates for the Chinese Federal Reserve banking system were not optimal, and he immediately disappeared into a gulag for 2 or 3 years. And when he came back out, he was like a hollow shell of a man who only did talks to show that he wasn't dead yet. And Baidu's IPO was canceled, everything about a Chinese corporation is at the mercy of the Chinese Communist Party, which isn't really communist. I mean, it's a misnomer because they're an authoritarian, hybrid, state-controlled kind of capitalism. They're not independent companies in the same sense that we have here.
So half of Americans use TikTok. And so you're saying that because China has a different capitalism than we do, that because they have different laws than we do, right, that these companies have to abide by, that even though TikTok follows all American law, that they shouldn't operate in the US?
So they don't. Here's the reality.
What law do they not follow?
Okay, so they've already abused their ability to get people's personal information. So what they make you sign when you agree to use TikTok is essentially the ability for them to use absolutely everything that could possibly be used on your phone. And there's no reason that they need that much information.
Do you have any evidence of that?
Yes. Like, you have to do some research. Just Google it. So
yeah, sure, I'll Google. What am I Googling?
Okay. TikTok abuses information, privacy violations, abuse of journalists who accuse them abusing the personal information of those journalists to attack the journalists, accusing them of abusing personal information. They've used private information from journalists to go after and harass the journalists, accusing them of using private information, right?
Yeah, so when I do a search, I found that there is a $368 million children's data privacy violation in Europe.
All I'm going to say is this. Let's just say, let's say it's what you say, and let's say it's what I say, and we can both grant, for the sake of argument, how would we handle it if that were true? And we can look at the empirics later, right? So we'll both do our research, and we'll come back and maybe have another conversation about this someday with more data. But for the sake of
that's fair.
If what I say is true, okay, if you look into it and you find that I'm not bullshitting, then this is what policymakers are afraid of, and this is why the phones and routers and communications equipment by Huawei were banned from the U.S. government, from any kind of government usage. It's that the reason we know that they put backdoors in their equipment is because we put backdoors in ours, right? When it comes to the NSA and U.S. companies, there are backdoors, there are zero-day exploits. There is a program called Prism. Snowden exposed it. So we're not accusing them of doing anything that we don't do. The difference is that we don't install an app, we don't ask China to install an app on their phone that gives them the kind of information that TikTok gives. And they would be insane to click accept voluntarily on such an agreement. And the stuff that TikTok takes is not normal. There's no other app on the App Store that takes as much as TikTok takes. And the reason TikTok takes it is so they can abuse it directly in the hands of the Chinese Communist Party. They have the same level of access to your info that the US government has to do sneaky stuff with the NSA and the PRISM program to get. You're just giving them the stuff that the NSA has to get shadily. You're agreeing to give it to them voluntarily. That's the problem.
Correct. Okay. So what if I'm okay with that? What if half of Americans are okay with that? Do you think that those Americans shouldn't be able to choose a company that supposedly follows U.S. law? They have not been sued in the U.S. But again, they're, like you said, the American companies do this, but the Americans aren't on Instagram as they are on TikTok, right? Americans are choosing TikTok because for some reason Americans trust that more. So why is that?
Americans are not well informed on these issues, so I fully expect them to just make irrational.
I think you're not well informed. With all due respect, I don't think you're well informed about this issue.
Okay, well, you could be right.
How long have you been on TikTok?
I don't use TikTok. I don't install programs that make those kinds of claims on my phone's data.
Right, but there's a side of TikTok that, like, I understand I understand your concern very much, but there's a part of TikTok that is provided that TikTok get. There's a thing in TikTok that I get, like an adrenaline rush almost, from how good the videos are. and how good the format is, it makes Instagram look like a joke to me. And to me, like, I enjoy the benefits so much that I don't give a shit that, sorry, excuse me my language. I don't care that the Chinese government is collecting whatever information, because, and again, whichever platform I use, I'm going to get my information stolen for some nefarious reason anyway. So what if I don't care? Why should you prevent me from being able to release my information in a legal way?
So I don't think you're being irrational. I think that every individual is only worried kind of about what they can see on their plate. And to them, if they like TikTok, it's very compelling, it's very fun. They're just making a rational decision that they just want to keep using TikTok. I get that. Like, I respect I don't think you're irrational or crazy. I'm not calling you like a poor reasoner for making the choice that you're making. What I'm saying is that if you are looking at it from the perspective of what China can do with this, the way that US policymakers have to, and if you remember what Russia did to interfere with our elections in recent election cycles, you'll understand that the policymakers don't really care if you like TikTok if it can be used to manipulate our society in very nefarious ways.
Which I have to jump in there and say, I don't like short form content. I'm not a fan of it. I don't like the snippets unless it's, and I don't mind snippets that are snippets from larger content. So I understand the marketing appeal of that, of using short form content in order to spread the word, or kind of like, the word of mouth of larger stuff. So I see the utility in that, but I don't like the idea of people out there creating content that is strictly short form in order to convey complex ideas in such a shorthanded manner, because it lends itself to putting out those ideas malformed or in some other twisted way, or some, it lends itself to the misapplication, or I would say the misrepresentation of major concepts. And
I can understand that.
That's a personal thing. It's totally subjective. I just don't like that because it lends itself towards spreading, bad thinking or poor thinking skills. So that's why I'm against
TikTok videos. TikTok videos are up to 10 minutes long.
Yeah, that may be that's a thing they got going on, or maybe they're opening it up to that degree. I just know that when people think TikTok, generally they think those short little videos. And I know that the vast majority of TikToks are all really, really short. I know I've responded to.
Have you ever used Vine?
I'm familiar with Vine, but Vine is, before I really got into content creation. Vine was a little bit before me, but I'm familiar with what Vine with what Vine is, but I would say the direction that TikTok has gone, that Vines were short enough for people to kind of like basically lay down a proposition and people could argue for or against it from there. But it didn't really convey deeper, further topics or allow for the spreading of misinformation to the degree that TikTok has, or even Instagram has. So I'd say that there's a similarity, but I don't think that they're the same in the level of information they allow to push out there in the world. So, but then again, like I said, it's just a subjective opinion. Private platforms can do whatever the hell they want. I'm not a fan of it myself. But
you want to give a case for why he disagrees, I think.
Well, I was just going to say, like, Vine, in my opinion, was it was shut down I think it was shut down because it wasn't as controlled as other platforms were in the early, like, or I would say the mid 2010s, when, according to, I guess I would say, various sources, that the FBI has their dirty fingers in a lot of social media platforms and a lot of control over social media platforms. But they don't have their greasy fingers on TikTok like they do on, like, for example, Twitter in 2016 and 2017.
Have you read the Twitter files? or like heard summaries of the response rates to?
I've heard summaries. I haven't read. I read the whole thread, but I didn't read the entire I didn't read all the emails.
Okay, mostly just talking about the government requests. So let's just
I did
all
see the
drama
government
stuff.
request.
The government request data. I haven't read every one of them. I've just looked at the aggregate data, and Destiny does a pretty good job of bringing this stuff up with people who kind of strawman the Twitter situation. Because what people will say is like, oh, the FBI was controlling Twitter and was like censoring people and deciding what people could say and couldn't say, right? The reality was there's actually really easy to acquire data that anyone can crunch the numbers on what percentage of FBI requests were granted and what kind of FBI requests were granted. And the actual frequency of FBI requests being granted was really low. It was I think it was about a quarter of requests were granted. And it was almost entirely the ones where they had a compelling case that it was promoting terrorism or promoting violence of some kind of thing that's basically banned in almost all media. So it violated Twitter's own TOS. And the reason that Twitter granted those requests was usually because it just violated their policies too. They're like, yeah, we agree this is objectionable content or whatever, so we'll remove it or whatever. So a lot of these requests that people are portraying as very overreaching and sort of all-encompassing were much more limited and weren't granted with the frequency or the kinds of requests. If they said, look, this person's an activist and we just want to keep an eye on them COINTELPRO style, that did not get granted in almost any of the cases I can remember. So it's true that the federal government is watching all sorts of social media, and we know that the NSA in particular is just hoovering everything into a big hard drive in the sky. They're listening.
I think it's much more. There's much more than that. The Twitter files expose that not only were they making requests to take down tweets. In my opinion, I think that's a good broad understanding of the Twitter files. But from what I understand, the FBI paid tens of millions of dollars to each of these companies, YouTube, Twitter, and so on, so that we wouldn't be, so that we wouldn't have a social media platform that's autonomous, essentially.
But it's sort of reasonable if they make a request. If they say, "Look, do a bunch of work,"
no, it's not.
If they say, "Look, have a dozen employees spend $100 an hour to figure this shit out in your very technical system," you would expect that they have to pay for that service to do the work, right? Now, the implication is, well, if they're paying money, that they're somehow getting control over the platform. But I don't think that follows. I think you would expect them to have to pay to get some elaborate investigation done on their behalf.
But if they're hold on, if you're enforcing the law, right, then you don't need to pay the person who needs to follow the law to follow the law. That's not how that works.
Here's the thing. If a person is subpoenaed, then going to court, you don't get paid to go to court. That's true, right? But you know who is paid? The jury, right? And the reason is because they're taking time off of work, and if they don't pay the jury, then most of the jury won't show up because they will starve to death because they're living paycheck to paycheck.
Right, but it should be Twitter's finances that pay for these investigations to ensure that Twitter follows the law. But that's how it works for all companies.
If that were the case, the FBI could DOS attack Twitter by just making 1 billion requests and driving them out of business. And they would be legally required to comply. They wouldn't be able to pay for all the employees.
Right. But that's that's exactly how it should work.
No, you would just be able to destroy any social media company you didn't like.
Any social media that's not any social media platform that is not following the law. That's the role of the FBI. And so I think you're confused. It should be us that decides what kind of speech is and is not allowed. Not some organization that is using our taxpayer dollars to decide these things under the table.
That's a fair point, but it also doesn't follow that this has anything to do with the appropriateness of the way the FBI was engaging with Twitter, right? Because the way the FBI was engaging with Twitter makes sense. I don't agree with a lot of their...
No, it doesn't make sense. I think there's a lot of things that were censored that I think should not have been censored.
Sure. I would agree that about 75% of the FBI's requests were bullshit and should not have been granted, and Twitter didn't grant them, right? And there were probably some that were granted that were borderline or shitty, right? But what I don't think is that the FBI was just buying control over Twitter, because they got what they wanted less than a quarter of the time.
Though.
And what they were paying was to compensate the time, which every time they made a request, it cost Twitter money to check the request and deny it. So if they did 100 requests and Twitter denies 75 of them, do you think Twitter wants to spend 75 cases?
That's their job. Yeah, well, that's
It's
their.
not their
Hold on. Yeah, it is. It's their job to follow the law.
Okay.
Yes,
Is it your job? Is it your job to serve in a jury without being compensated? No, it's not.
But
So
Twitter is not a public jury, right? Twitter is a private company. They have to follow the law, and in order to follow the law, you have to ensure that your platform meets certain criteria, right? And if the platform is not meeting those criteria, then the FBI can just take them to court. And like you said, they'll destroy the Twitter platform. And I think honestly, that should have happened, because we shouldn't have platforms that are run amok like we did in the mid 2010s, right? I think that caused more damage in the long run than it saved. But I want to make another point too. You're also kind of agreeing with me that there are still requests that are being granted, that are being suggested under the table, and you're agreeing with me that the company is being paid to make these corrections. And I think you would agree with me that some of these requests were unjust. And in my opinion, that is a problem, right? And to me, the outrage over that should be much more significant than the outrage over TikTok. But
I hear that you disagree with me, and it's okay if we disagree. I think I made a case for why it's completely untenable and would just drive a company out of business to not get paid to do non-compliance, but actually case investigation, right? And so the compliance work that Facebook does, or the compliance work that Twitter does, they pay for that internally. That's just their normal compliance. But these are extra requests that are being done on top of their compliance work, which are investigation requests. And the fact that the majority of them aren't granted means that the majority of them are bogus and are a waste of Twitter's time, right? So it's because the FBI tries to overreach and gets denied that it makes sense that they pay for all these bullshit requests that they're wasting Twitter's time with, right? Now, there are other kinds of requests that are much more problematic, like the request of the Saudi government to get the personal information of activists and critics of the Saudi government is way more of a problem, is way more of a controversy. And Elon increased the rate at which they're doing that, and it's getting worse because Elon got billions of dollars.
The rate at which what?
Okay, so Elon is granting Saudi requests to dox activists or critics that the Saudi government wants to go after at a rate that's at roughly double what it was before he took over the company. And the reason he's doing that is he was given billions of dollars of Saudi money to fund the takeover of Twitter. They financed his takeover of Twitter amongst other investors, right? So there are other problems with Twitter that have nothing to do with the federal government, that are just Twitter.
I agree. I think Twitter's way worse. I read this morning a whole thread from Alex Jones. Alex Jones mentioned one thing against Hitler, and everything in his comments these Nazis calling him a traitor. And to me, it's amazing that they can say the things that they can say on this platform.
Did you see Alex Jones debate Destiny by surprise? So Destiny got surprised by a surprise Alex Jones debate. They sprung it on him without telling him in advance, and he knew almost nothing about Alex Jones. He didn't even know what Alex Jones was charged with and punished for. So he had to ask Alex Jones. So yeah, what did you get charged with? Because he literally just was not prepared to talk to Alex Jones. But they had a debate, and Destiny made all the points I'm making about the appropriateness of the way Twitter responded and denied most of the federal government's requests. And the things that they granted were almost all things that they should grant because they were violations of the law. Now,
who's the decider of the should part?
Well, it's a combination, right? So they have an internal review board, which is doing the investigation into each of these requests, and they look at it, and the criterion they use is, does this violate our own policies? And if it does, then they grant it. If it doesn't, and the government is just making shit up and like trying to abuse it and like go after people they don't like, then they just say no, and that's 75%
Okay.
of the time.
So what you're telling me, and correct me if I'm wrong, what you're telling me is that you're okay with the federal government paying Twitter money to investigate themselves in certain things so that they ensure that they're abiding by the law.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll tell you what I'm okay with, right? I would rather have a framework in which the federal government gets involved if and only if the Twitter is not abiding by the law, and they already have the evidence for that, right? They don't need to dig around if they don't have, and if they need to dig around, then of course they can pass whatever Patriot Act 2.0 that they need to pass in order to search, without a search warrant. But if you don't have the explicit content that needs to be removed, that's violating the law, then you're already overreaching. Because, and I'll tell you why. The reason is because a social media platform needs to have some level of autonomy where the people can decide what is and is not true. And when you decide that you have these under the table, in my opinion, the FBI and the CIA are the most corrupt institutions in the world, especially historically. And I would much rather have my own control over what I can see and what I cannot see, which is why I love TikTok so much. They have a great algorithm for me. I've learned so much from that platform. And for people to just say, no, you can't learn stuff like that anymore. Yeah, because blah, 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 reasons. So and it's for your security. And it's just, I hate that answer, honestly.
So defeating. Let me say that's a straw man of what's actually been said. So what was actually said is that the Chinese government needs to be divested of its direct control of the company, and that if that's the case, then it wouldn't be banned. As long as a non-Chinese government,
of course, you're not going to do that.
As long as a non-Chinese government-controlled entity owns Twitter or TikTok, then it's not a problem, right? As long as they are under the normal legal framework that the rest of the world operates under and isn't being controlled by the
TikTok's
Chinese
not going to sell themselves, right? They're the largest app in the world, right? They're the number one app in the world. Every other country has TikTok as the number one app. And in the US, it's the number one app. And so they're not going to sell just for this 150 million users in the US, right? What they're going to do is it's a ban on TikTok. And for me, what that means is I can't watch good content. I'm going to have to go to fucking Instagram. Instagram. And dude, that sucks. My whole social life is like, it's completely upended because of that. It's crazy.
Given where we're at in this has been a fantastic convo, and I think that for the sake of the audience and that we got somebody with their hand up, I think we're at a point where I think I do understand that it's an opinion and the viewpoints on these things. I think both of y'all have laid down some solid argumentation. And there's stuff out there that can be read about these things, whether or not you agree with them or disagree with them, especially in, when you juxtapose them against what our own government has done, the apparent possible hypocrisy of our government in regards to they do this, but we're not going to let, China do or whatever. However it lays down, I think we're at a good point. And I do know we need to jump on to Demolish. Demolish has had their hand up for a minute. And I want to make sure that other people...
I appreciate the conversation.
Can have their hands up. Absolutely. So fantastic
great
stuff.
Conversation. I just want to make one quick closing remark, because I just want to say, like I said, I totally sympathize. I'm not criticizing anyone who uses TikTok. I'm not saying they're dumb or wrong or bad. It's just that the federal government has to make a decision based on what the Chinese government is likely to do, in the same way that the Russians were proven to do in our election system, to interfere and do espionage and do shady stuff. So the solution is you can have the exact same kind of content on TikTok if it divests from the Chinese government, or on YouTube Shorts. And I don't even notice TikTok's existence because I see the same kind of content on YouTube Shorts. I know that there's not as much of it. It's probably not as high quality, whatever, that all the cool kids are on TikTok doing it there. But come on, like it's literally the next day, everyone creates a YouTube Shorts account, uploads the same content. This doesn't disrupt anything. Do you think these content creators are just going to go out of business because of a ban? No, they're just going to switch platform.
Right. Yeah. All right. So, Demolished Doctrine, you've had your hand up for quite a bit. So let's make sure we bring you up. You are invited to the stage. Good to see you, Demolish.
Peace and respect to you all. How are you guys doing today?
Doing good. Thank you very much. What do you got for us today?
Well, I'm a theist, and I would beg of Amy, if Amy you're available, you give your opinion of me so we can really leap forward in the conversation. Very nice. Thank you for that, Amy. Okay, so I am a theist, but you've probably not heard of I Am So Fringe. You've probably not heard of my arguments whatsoever. First time listening to your channel, first time coming onto your channel, and that's all because of Amy Newman. So know that Amy is spreading you guys around.
Awesome. Fantastic. Yay. And there is no cream or spray or pill at the doctor that can get rid of me once I'm in. So I appreciate that, Amy. Thank you very much. So I'm curious, when you say that you're a theist, just so I can, because I'm learning here. So you say that you're a theist. Does that break down to a specific denomination or a particular system of faith, or where are you? Are you just like a kind of like a classic just theist?
But that brings me directly to the assertion that if you were to want to explain something to a multitude of cultures, you would have to do it through their own cultural norms and value systems. So there would automatically, in the same story, appear the difference, appear to be some difference in the story just because you are adhering to that culture in that way. And I think that we're so new at learning each other that we still believe that there are these huge differences between human beings when there really isn't. But instead, what is going on is that everyone was given the truth early on in their culture as soon as it was well established in these religious stories, and in a way that would make sense to their culture as a fairy tale to be decoded later.
Are you a classical theist?
What's up, Stephanie? What's up?
I don't know what that means.
You know, Platonist or something, or are you like a Christian of a specific denomination?
Mr. Atheist?
Well, I believe that all of the ancient stories are telling a truth in a certain reading frame in different ways for different cultures.
Okay.
Oh yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I'm just trying to understand like your kind of your picture. So like there's different versions of this, but when we say theism or theist, we're often talking about the minimal definition that is sometimes called classical theism, which is the idea that God has omni-properties, that God is the ground of, or the cause of the universe. And I'm not doing a good job of summarizing the classical theist position exactly, but it's a minimal definition as opposed to a very specific story. So you're not claiming that one of these religions is 100% true in a literal sense. You're saying that they're all partly true in describing some general kind of God's existence.
No, the only difference that I see is cultural differences. I don't see any differences in the actual stories themselves or what they're trying to express. And no, I don't believe in any kind of a quad omni God, because it's logically impossible.
Okay.
Also,
so you're not a classical theist. You're like more like a deist or a pantheist?
Well, I would just make it easy for you as possible, because skipping forward is the best thing to do over these super minor topics that really don't add to the conversation much, just establish definitions. Is to just give you a definition for what I believe that God is.
Great.
As soon as there is man realizes that he's having babies, and that's going to be a society, there needs to be some structure that guides that society for that particular animal. And I think that almost anyone would agree with me. Some of the most valuable things, in fact, I cannot seem to improve on this list for all my trying. Some of the ideals that humans really need and are deeply benefit from are wisdom, knowledge, counsel, understanding, fear as in respect, power, and conservation. And that those fundamental things are the descriptor of, at least in the English rendering of the Old Testament Yahweh God.
What were you going to say, Amy?
Oh no, I just realized that when you guys were asking me questions, you couldn't hear me. I think my mic was muted. The only intro I wanted to say was I had no other way to say it, was he was one of the good ones. That sounded horrible, but he is a nice theist. He is a mensch who also believes in God, and like he says, he's probably heretical to lots of the other Abrahamic religions.
Oh, probably all of them.
Cool. So I'm curious in that respect, because when I look at the history of our species, and the development of our cultures over time, and someone in my live chat brought up something interesting, and it kind of crossed my mind as well, that it sounds very Joseph Campbellish. The idea of like the like one God, many faces, the hero of 1,000 faces kind of thing. And so as we developed through time and we interacted with our environments and we established, small tribes that were able to survive, growing up to larger societies, civilizations, so on and so forth, that what I see is that human beings have a tendency to describe the things around us from our own frame of reference. So the way we internalize stuff, we also tend to impose upon describing the external world. And in describing phenomena that we did not readily understand, we would describe those things in a way that made sense and kind of aligned with our understanding of ourselves, which is what lends primitive human beings to kind of anthropomorphize phenomena, or anthropomorphize the explanations of phenomena. And so I see a commonality there. I also completely agree that there was a utility in original religious ideologies, or that kind of the unifying thoughts that brought us together and held us together as small groups in order to survive, because survival in numbers, you unify enough people under one banner, you can get them working efficiently and more successfully. And so that improves the odds of survival. So there is a utility there, but I wouldn't say, but I feel like you're jumping the gap from the utility of a social convention to it actually saying something about the reality in and of itself. Because just because you have a conceptualization that is a positive utility doesn't mean that conceptualization represents anything that exists, that really truly exists in reality. So I think that you're jumping a bridge there it's pretty far. So I'm wondering how you do that. How do you reconcile that?
Well, first let me agree with you, but it also works in reverse, that it's using natural surroundings to justify life seems in our intuitive nature. But also the reverse of that would be true, that if you wanted to explain a complex idea to people using animism, their local surroundings is a great way to do it, which is what I think happened. And that they're talking about something, these stories are talking about something that has not occurred, and just obviously has not occurred. Now, what you've asked me to justify lends very closely, or suggests very closely, that you would want me to justify the future. I can't do that. I can disprove assertions about the past that such things didn't happen, but of course I can't prove the future.
Okay, so I'm not sure I'm tracking when it comes to like a reference to the future, because as far as the future goes, I mean, the one thing that we could posit is that if things like, this is awesome because it's the third time it's come up, but if the concepts like memetics keep moving forward, then give it 100 years, give it 200, give it 500 years, 1,000 years, even if human beings are still around then, we may be extinct by that point. But that these concepts will continuously evolve to a certain point, because certain information will fall to the wayside, other information will take its place. These concepts will mutate. They may revert back to more primitive forms. They may be completely eliminated in the face of, you know, evidence that we discover. So we can only say that the only thing that we could predict, I think, with any relative success will be that these concepts that are current today will change in the future, just as those concepts in the past changed to where they are today. And we'll be able to track those changes through a variety of means. So essentially, it's just this kind of like snowball rolling downhill of human conceptualizations that ultimately change in the face of better information, which is essentially what we constantly do. We see a phenomena, we try to describe it. We know very, very little about the mechanisms that are at play all around us. So we come up with the best explanation possible. And then as we uncover more, as we progress, as more voices get added to the, as more voices and opinions and experiments and whatever get added to the pile, these things get sussed out, and then we eschew the old primitive stuff. And we move on to the more accurate things, like, you know, the Ptolemaic model to the Copernican model, and so on and so forth, and like Darwinian evolution to the modern synthesis. So, because these things actively get more accurate, and we have a vested interest in ensuring that we keep this process moving, because the more accurate and the more efficient and that we can interact with our environments, the better our odds of survival. So that's why evolution kind of truth tracks. You know, it's kind of a truth tracking mechanism, because an organism that has a better understanding of its surroundings, which means it has the genetic predisposition in order to grasp information, employ that information, and work with it better. So those humans are selected for because they can operate more quickly and more efficiently in their environments. And so truth kind of lends itself, which means the old primitive explanations kind of fall to the wayside.
Sure.
So I'm just, like I said, I don't know how you're getting to like the position that you could be a theist in the wake of that.
I don't see anything that needs to be changed about wisdom, knowledge, counsel, understanding, fear, power, and conservation.
Would you say you hold to it? Would you say you hold to it as kind of like an emotional appeal, that it provides a personal utility to you, or like a psychological or an emotional utility to you?
Oh, no, I think it's objectively true that you could not form that sentence that you just formed without those 7 things.
Okay, but the existence of those can be imposed by society itself. You don't need a god or a deity entity in order to impose those upon the system.
Well, that's interesting. No, you're missing me. That is the deity.
Oh, okay. So you have a different conceptualization of the God than I was understanding, because I was looking at it from the external figure.
Definition.
Well, the biblical
actual biblical. I go with the no. If you're going to say that it's something that I didn't just say, then you're talking about dogmatic beliefs.
Well, yeah, I'm just like my understanding was that the God entity, especially the biblical definition, is an entity that exists external to us. It is an actual, in the biblical sense of it, it is an actual existing entity that is external to human experience, that is there to be experienced. You know, it's not something that's like within us, but it's an actual like existing thing.
It actually does say within you, and in fact, it says more specifically closer than your jugular vein. Literally,
I know, but it understands it. But it definitely states that it is an entity that exists external to human beings. Like there are humans, and then there is God, and God is an entity that exists that is not itself human. So it is an entity that exists, and that it is woven into like you know, however they want to, however what poetic way the Hebrew language states that it is woven into, you know, the very nature of human beings or whatever, and you know, morals written in our hearts and all that other nonsense. But it is itself an entity that exists external to us. But we know that these social conventions don't require an external entity in order to exist themselves, because humans can create them.
Oh, I'm saying humans necessitate those ideals. And I don't want to conflate an internal critique with application. I mean, I'm aware how religions have been used in the past to manipulate people, to conquer, in war, to steal, all kinds of horrible things. But I'm really talking about what it has to say about itself.
Okay, so it feels like an appeal back to the utility of these things. So I understand the appeal. I understand the utility, but it seems like you're just bringing additional unnecessary baggage to the conversation.
Like what?
By calling it a god and by making
Oh,
those references. Yeah.
Aside from whatever dogmatic assertion some religious person might make, I'm literally using the biblical definition of Yahweh.
Okay.
Listed in the book of Isaiah. Sorry.
Okay, but I mean, it still doesn't. I'm still trying to bridge the gap here on this. Is like, why use the Bible? Let's start with there. Why use the Bible at all?
Oh, for that particular reference, it's true in reality and it's evident.
Are you saying that because the Bible exists, or because the Yahweh or this entity Yahweh exists?
No, the humans exist,
right?
And we need wisdom, knowledge, counsel, understanding, fear, power, and conservation. We need them.
Okay, those can come from us. Those don't require a god.
Those are the God. They don't. I don't know why you keep saying require a God. They are the God.
Okay, but that's like pantheism. That's like saying the universe is also God. It's just unnecessary baggage that can't be justified.
No, it's not unnecessary baggage because I'm only talking about the human animal and what we need.
Okay, so why call it God?
Because it is the highest thing to a human being, because of what the animal that we are. It's literally the highest.
Okay, so it feels very much, and I'm not trying to be derisive of this, it feels very much like you're co-opting the concept and applying it differently, which is fine. You're totally, it's totally. I mean, words can be used however you want them to use, but there's kind of a social viewpoint that would say that when you're invoking that concept, that you mean other things. Now, I know you can go on to explain it, that you're not using it in the same context as the biblical Yahweh, that is the war, the storm and war and metallurgy god that exists external to us, and whatever, blah 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 blah. But I see what you're doing there. I just don't see why you're doing it.
I'm doing an internal critique of what the text says about itself. And I think these things are true in reality and worth talking about.
Okay, but you can talk about them with but the idea of invoking the concept of a god, however you want to do it, however you want to define it, or however you want to apply it is fine. But just invoking the concept in and of itself, it seems unnecessary. Just because human society or humans themselves hold a particular thing in the highest of esteems, doesn't indicate like that. It doesn't even justify calling it a god. It just means that that's something that we find very important. Because when you invoke God, when you invoke the term God, there are other implications that come along with that.
Well, then you're forcing things onto the definition I'm giving. I'm not doing that. You are.
What am I forcing onto it?
You're forcing a traditional view of what a God is onto what I'm saying, and then saying that I'm making it unnecessary complex. Actually, sir, you are the one making it unnecessary complex.
No. I'm addressing that there is a kind of collective social idea as to what is generally meant when that term is invoked, and I'm completely understanding that you're not utilizing that, which is fine. My question is, why would you use it? Because it seems that when it all boils down, when we cut to the core of this thing, the only reason you're using it is because it has personal utility for you.
I think it has personal utility for everyone, but
not for me. I find it actually damaging because it brings in a concept that has unnecessary baggage that must then be completely parsed out before we can get to the root of it. And then even then, calling it a god isn't justified because you don't need the god in order to convey the full context of what the god is supposedly supplying.
Okay, well, you don't have to do that. I recommend you don't.
Okay. I mean, I get that. Anybody else? Amy, Ix?
I wanted to ask a quick question. Are you a fan of Jordan Peterson?
Fan? No, I'm not a fan of Jordan Peterson. Although he has had some insight into a few biblical stories, though he didn't complete them.
Okay. But you're familiar with his sort of complex position about God as a kind of, well, his definition of God is very, very long, but he read it out during a debate with Sam Harris. And it's similar to some of what you said in the sense that he starts the story with talking about structure and how humans need structure and how the idea of God is like the highest form of humans' need for structure being fulfilled by a kind of metaphorical idea where he doesn't literally believe God exists, but he acts as though he says, because he thinks the idea that God exists is like a really useful idea that's super helpful to humans or something.
I can't disagree with that whole cloth, and I'd need some time to think about it, obviously.
Yeah.
I didn't know that he held that position. I've heard the loose quote, "I act as if," but that doesn't mean much to me. I don't know. I'd have to spend some time on that and actually, find him saying it. You said it was a Sam Harris debate for conversation, or was it a debate or a conversation?
It was kind of a both, more of a conversation, but there were definitely some debate aspects. And one of them was just, what does Jordan Peterson mean by God? And, Sam Harris was kind of critical of his very, very long, very complicated definition. But that aside, you may find that some of what you're saying is in alignment with what JP is saying. I'm not a big fan of this approach, other than to say like it's useful psychologically to analyze like our reasons for God. God belief is a natural phenomena, in my opinion, and this is a useful way to understand some of the appeal of the idea of God, or the usefulness or sort of justification for its success. The question is, does it matter to you if it's true or not? And
yes,
if it's not the case that any supernatural creator of the universe or anything like that is real, and if believing in this commits a person to an epistemic, by that I mean like the way they believe things is now in a form that they're willing to believe all kinds of things, all doctrinal, orthodox things, many of which have very alarming consequences. Some good, some bad, but the bad ones are so bad, it seems, that it doesn't really it's not like you just do a column and you're like, what are the pluses, what are the minuses? They believe this, that helps them. They believe this, it's very dangerous. There's more good than dangerous, therefore religion good, right? It's not a math equation like that. In my view, it's like, why not just believe what's true and explain the reasons for social contracts and societal structure the way that the deists who made America did? They didn't belabor the religious aspect of it, even though they mentioned it. They explained in things like Thomas Paine's Common Sense, for anyone to read and agree with, whether you believed in God or not, good arguments for the type of society that we want to live in and the type of structure that we need. Why not just do that and just base it off of the truth instead of tying it to God beliefs?
Okay, well, I don't hold the definition of God that you're apparently referring to in a average Christian doctrinal, dogmatic, traditional sense.
Yeah, I didn't say you did. I'm just saying you support their believing anyway because it's beneficial or something. And I'm wondering, why should we believe in that manner instead of just believing in the thing that you think is beneficial without the God belief?
Or that this is some creator of the universe. I don't think that's what's being claimed in the stories either, since the universe is never referenced whatsoever, and the only referent is the planet itself, and that's the only claim being made.
Yeah, I think that's perfectly defensible. Like, I'm not going to disagree with any of your interpretations, probably being valid or viable interpretations. Like, all I'm asking is, look, if you support religion generally because you believe that it encourages people to have the right kind of reverent and respectful attitude towards the social
I think
structure,
it's horrible.
Well, okay. Do you think that we should believe in God because it benefits us to have a social structure that's inspired by it?
Oh, you would have that. You could have that without that.
Okay, maybe I just misunderstood what you're saying because I was a little distracted. If so, I apologize.
Okay.
Interesting.
And also that there is no Yahweh. There's only Elohim before Adam. So it's powerful beings, plural, not monotheistic, writing the story. And then when the story gets to mankind, it flashes back in time to mankind needing this set of ideals, which we do.
I see what you I see where you're going with it. I think it's very poetic. But like I said, I don't agree with it. I think that you're identifying something that was common in that's common in humans and kind of running with it per the utility that it provides us as a species. I think I personally don't think that we need it anymore, that it's kind of ancient thinking. But I understand the appeal to the utility there. I get that completely. So,
and if you don't think that immaterial constructs are important, how are you talking?
Well, okay. So when you say immaterial constructs, if you're just simply talking about, if you're talking about abstracts, okay. So literally, like I understand abstract concepts. That like I said, I understand your appeal to the utility. I get that completely. Okay, there's historical precedent all throughout, literally going back thousands of years. So I get it. I just don't think that it is necessary anymore because we have grown beyond the need for those things.
We've grown beyond the need for wisdom.
No, we've grown beyond the need for thinking that there must be something external that gives those things that allows for those things to be. Like an explanation for that. Like, why do human beings need wisdom? Okay. What is wisdom? Does wisdom even exist? Can we actually know anything? Can we make absolute statements about reality?
But it seems that you're assigning personage instead of just being. Am I wrong?
Okay. So I think we're at an identity issue here. Is like, does this conceptualization of this Yahweh character in your mind have its own identity separate from everything else?
That it's a list of immaterial constructs, yes, but it doesn't have personage.
Okay, so like again, that's similar. I'm not calling you a pantheist, but that's similar to pantheism. That's calling the universe God.
No, it's not the universe. It's just a set of...
I'm analogizing it. That's like pantheism. That's basically taking something that we identify. Okay, we can identify the universe, and then there are people who also call the universe God. They say the universe is also God, and I say, okay, I understand why you're calling it God, but why call it God? Because all calling the universe God, as all pantheists do, is that I understand why they're doing it. I understand why they're doing it. Their reasoning for doing it, but I don't see the necessity for doing it because all they're doing is dragging unnecessary baggage into the conversation. Because now we have to address the universe in the context of the God concept. Now, if they want to, use some sort of proprietary definition to try and describe God in some unique way, that's on them. Because the social paradigm is not going to say, oh, we're going to willingly accept this very unique descriptor of God in order to justify the usage of the term, when the term itself is unnecessary. Because all it does is muddy the water. All it does is make things unnecessarily, complex. And the reason I'm wondering is, like, you do this. You operate in this capacity either because it fulfills some personal utility for you, some emotional utility, or it answers some question that you don't think anyone else can answer, or it bridges some gap in our human reasoning that you think must be bridged. So I'm trying to find out why make that leap? Why make that jump when the jump is not necessary? When all the answers are on this side. So
I have to agree with you that the term God does carry a lot of additional baggage that I don't have any value.
Right.
I don't assign any value to, but I just don't. I mean, if you want to suggest a better word, I would hear you.
I don't think there even needs to be a word.
There doesn't need to be a word for the most fundamental things that are immaterial constructs and or spirits. That's the way they're often referred to.
Can I propose something?
For the human animal, so that they can live cooperatively as a successful society. You don't think that needs a label? Because it was really hard to say that.
Go ahead, X.
Go ahead. Well, I wanted you to respond first, and then I'll make a proposal.
Oh, okay. So what you're doing is you're taking a lot of the individual identified things that are necessary that we have found to be necessary for a progressive human civilization. Okay, the things that we should endeavor to strive towards if our collective subjective goal is the prolonged success and increase of our society. Okay. And I get that, but you could just call that the social contract. You could just call that a social convention. You could just there's a number of things you could utilize. But even then, you don't even need to lump them all together into one thing. You could simply identify each and every single one of those things individually, and people kind of collectively understand what you're talking about. You're talking about the norms of social convention is what you're talking about. So each one of them has their own label. Each one has their own label. I don't think there's a necessity or a need to group them all together, lump them all together to call them something.
Well, I think they're human evidence and societally necessary. I'm not certain that everyone is settled on precisely that list, and thereby it's not universal.
Yeah, I would agree with you. It is entirely subjective. Yes, I would agree with you.
I'm not sure I could say it the way you said, because that would at least suggest lightly that it was universal, and I don't think it is.
Yeah, I also don't agree that it's universal. I believe it's completely subjective to the individual, to the group, to the society, to the nation, and to the planet. And the difficulty is coming up the middle and trying to find a middle ground that every single person on the planet agrees to, which seems impossible, but is not impossible to do, but is obviously we've seen is a very, very difficult task.
Hasn't happened yet. I have to agree with you.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome. Well, I mean, we do have some other people with their hands up, and I think
X wanted to say something.
Go ahead.
I do have a proposal. So what I wanted to suggest is I've often speculated along this same line of reasoning, which is, what are the things that are of most transcendent value and are the best things for people to kind of almost revere and emphasize in the way that we teach people in our education system, in the kind of things that we encourage and cultivate in our society. And it does seem to me like there are quite a few candidates, and it's okay if we don't have an answer right away, but it's kind of like studying a compound or a bundle like consciousness. So if you look at people studying consciousness, there's a lot of really good neuroscience, there's a lot of really good artificial intelligence, and there's a huge feedback loop between the neuroscientists and the artificial intelligence people, where neuroscience says something about how the brain works, they do an experiment and they prove that it works, and they can predict what people are going to do, or they can read people's brains or whatever. And then AI says, oh, that's just like a thing that we've been thinking about doing, and then they do better AI, and they go back and forth. Now, if you look at the people who are trying to define consciousness philosophically or figure out how we should talk about it scientifically, they can't agree on what it even is, right? But what they do agree on is what its ingredients are. So like everyone who believes that consciousness is a thing because they experience it and they're studying it, they all agree that there's awareness, there's agency, there's the ability to predict the environment, to predict what other people feel and think. There's a huge laundry list of capabilities that humans have, all of which we would bundle and say they're connected to this consciousness thing. But what people mean by the word is they're trying to narrow it down to not all of those other things, which would be like implementations of consciousness or versions of consciousness or parts of consciousness. They're trying to say what's the minimal definition of consciousness, such that we could identify an animal and a human that both have it, even if the animal's very different from humans and can't do 99% of the things on that big list of cool stuff that we do with consciousness, right? So what's the minimal definition, right? And so the search for a good definition of consciousness involves studying hundreds of things which aren't included in the definition but are connected to understanding it, and then kind of ruling them out, but still studying them and how they relate to whatever consciousness is going to be defined as. It's okay if you don't have the right word for it, and I totally understand calling it God for now, but I would like to see the rigorous study of what are the most important driving ideas for human beings to flourish, and what should we call those things culturally going forward, as a kind of a research project, just like what should we call consciousness? How should we study that?
Someone in my live chat suggested there already is a word, and it's virtues.
Virtue's part of it. I would agree that's in there. Like if we were to just make the consciousness style list, what's the Christmas list or the checklist of all the things? Virtues are going to be big, but I think one of the concepts that I would pick that maybe a lot of people wouldn't, because it's the source or the explanatory mechanism, is the word emergence. Do you like the word emergence? Or do you think about that in terms of the universe and how the universe gets to be the way that it is?
It's a fine label for now, but it has no explanatory power. It's just observational.
Well,
I don't really like the word emergent.
Okay, so I mean, it depends on which usage you're talking. I think philosophically, emergence. A lot of views that are called emergent views are bad views because they're talking just about properties and like very like obscure philosophical senses of the word emergence. But if you talk about it the way that like empirical scientists talk about emergence, when we say that culture is emergent from language, or when we say that like chemistry is emergent from physics, we're saying that there's something which allows this other thing to come into being, which is you could be a reductionist and you could say that the other thing just reduces to the thing that it comes from. Like chemistry just is physics in different words, and culture just is the usage of language and other things in a bigger context. In the same way that traffic involves cars. You could just describe traffic as a bunch of cars and never use the word traffic. But traffic is a very useful concept to describe huge numbers of cars in an efficient manner. So the question is,
shorthand.
Yeah, so like when we develop concepts, we do lumping, where we say all these things are one big concept, and we do splitting, where we say, let's break it down to the lowest level, or let's break it down into all the subcategories. And both are useful for different use cases. But what I like about emergence is it says, what is the thing that we should be studying the mechanisms for, which I agree are not, the word emergence is not the mechanism, but it's a category of mechanisms, of which natural selection is one, of which stellar formation is one, of which the self-regulatory behaviors of social systems are one. And it's something we can model computationally. Different kinds of emergence happen, and they all have slightly different mechanisms. But what it fundamentally tells us is that the best things in life were not planned out in advance on like a spreadsheet and predicted necessarily. If someone was running the God computer of a simulated universe, they couldn't necessarily predict what it would look like at the end. But what can happen is from some raw ingredients, you can get amazing things that are, you know, from the perspective of a reverent person, blessings. But you're not thanking a person for planning it all out to be this way. That's where the God belief stuff gets kind of problematic, is the teleological approach to just thinking the whole universe as someone's plan is missing the actual mechanism, which is that good things come about all the time without there being a plan. And that's really cool. And so we should understand how good things come about so we can encourage more good things to emerge rather than to think that there is a big plan by a creator in the sky.
Yeah, you know, our society complains about alcohol usage and its abuse, but probably caused, you know, at least in the last couple hundred years, probably 50% of births. I mean, let's not completely dismiss that. Well, you guys have been a pleasure. Amy was completely correct. Thank you all so much for adding to my experience. And I would end my time and ask you to go ahead and let me back off stage by saying the following. That of course there are traditional Christian views on what the Bible has to say, but if one looks at the seven spirits of God, they're precisely and only, and make no claim otherwise, than to be a set of immaterial constructs. And thank you all so much.
Thank you, bud. Appreciate you coming up.
Very interesting topic.
And yeah, I'm gonna let Ix and JL be the opposition viewpoint on there because Richard's my friend and I love him, and yet I agree with everything Ix and JL said. So, mwah.
Awesome. All right, he's had his hand up for a bit, or they've had their hand up a bit. I see Comp Maker, good to see you, and let's bring you up. And D-Man, I see you as well. You've had your hand up, so I'll be sure to you'll be next in the list. So, Comp Maker, you are invited up to the stage. Or Comp Makey, sorry. Good to see you. How you doing?
How you doing? Is
Doing
Mike
good
bad right now?
What do you got for us today?
Okay, so like I wanted to ask you guys because I genuinely think America, they're not doing good right now. The economics or I can't even spell it out. The US dollar is going down so much, and like it would crash. Great, like there's gonna be a Great Depression. What do you think about that? Like people are stocking up on gold and stuff.
I don't agree with that. We're having a decent economy. We have people with high employment, low unemployment. Our GDP is fairly good. The inflation we've been tackling, but that generally comes at a worldwide inflation where we're still at a high range among a lot of other countries. And so we have a decent calm. Though this is politics, but yes.
Yeah, I mean, from what I've seen, as far as the economy goes, as far as my own or my wife's and I's portfolio goes, things seem generally are on the upright, as economically speaking, here in the U.S. Now, there's a lot of turmoil, of course, with overseas stuff and how those affect the markets, but generally we're in a good shot. Amy hit the nail on the head there. Employment is up; those numbers keep growing. Unemployment is down. Overall things are fairly positive at the moment. Those could change, obviously, but I don't think we're heading towards a depression.
To be honest, I think I don't know if you guys did it on purpose, bro, but from what I've been researching is that America's in a lot of debt. In a lot of
we
debt.
are, yeah. But okay, so the only thing, even though we've incurred a lot of debt, obviously there are ways that governments have around that and everything, but the only thing that I would say, the only kind of black cloud on the horizon that I think is the closest and we need to deal with economically speaking is the fact that it looks very, very much like we are heading towards another 2008. That's the only thing I'd be concerned about regarding the housing market. I see it happening
the housing
again.
is going to go up a lot.
Banks are doing the exact same thing that they were doing in 2008. Nobody is stopping them. The automotive market is doing it as well. So because corporations were not taught or did not have the consequences of their actions enforced upon them back in 2008, they are doing it again under different names. And so I think that right now is the biggest threat wise as far as our economy goes. But obviously, if that were to happen, the government would have another way to get around that as well. What are the extreme long-term effects of this? When we refer to inflation occurs obviously for a number of reasons, but the biggest thing that right now that's driving inflation is the fact that the people who control it, the massive profits that are going into certain coffers, those individuals are not willing to part with their profits for the sake of the costs of goods, and labor. That's the problem. So, what you identified as something that's going on in Canada right now, you have a lot of people in Parliament that are bitching about inflation, about the cost going up. And they're bitching about inflation because of the carbon taxes that are being put all over everything. Well, carbon taxes are meant to be put on the corporations. They incur that cost, and it's not supposed to affect the consumer to a degree that it becomes unsustainable. The only way to offset the carbon tax the way they offset it is to increase prices. Okay. And that's what they're identifying as inflation. The problem is that if they increase prices, they're artificially driving it up because they don't want to cut into their own profits to cover the carbon tax they don't want to cut into their profits for the things that their companies are actually doing, which is screwed up. But that's capitalism. Welcome to capitalism, So I'm not going to pay what I don't have. I'm not going to pay what I'm not forced to pay by law. So that's the whole issue.
I find crazy too. Like in Canada, I don't even know if it was Canada or I think it was Canada, but people, or I think it's America. Like this, I talked with one guy and he said one state, is if there's like a homeless guy or something, a poor guy or something, he can just get someone and then they'll pay him pay him like 50,000 some shit, 50K a month.
Yeah. So obviously capitalism works. Capitalism is fine. I have a problem with capitalism without regulation, which is what a lot of people in the U.S. want. So they want unregulated, unfettered capitalism, which of course leads to, in my personal opinion, all you have to do is look at the history of our species, and you can see that unfettered, unregulated capitalism will lead to a dystopic outcome. It always comes down to out to a dystopia. So
I mean, but there's a problem, right? I mean, there's one problem with America, especially like the people. Like, I respect the people that are working hard. Working like 8-12 hours a day.
Oh, here it comes.
People, but they still have to pay this. They still have the same money left as the people that work like 6 hours a day, or 4 hours a day. Because the more money you work, the more tax you have to pay in America.
Yeah, there was a time when it was fair. That time has long since passed. It's not fair anymore. Obviously, there are a number of a number of major issues that have created a systemic problem. And yes, we could address them, but the problem is the people in power have no incentive to address them, because to address them would mean that they lose the power that they have. But
I really don't get like why no one's like standing up for this shit. Like,
oh, there are people that are standing up for it and trying to fight against it. The biggest issue that we have in the people that are trying to fight against this thing is a lack of organization and a lack of a driving momentum, because the lack of organization lends itself to reducing the momentum that people can get. Now, it's very similar to the Occupy Wall Street movement. Occupy Wall Street movement was in my eyes was the right idea, but because it was so completely and utterly disorganized, nobody could get going in the right direction. So it was a whole bunch of people who were angry about the right thing, all coming together and then being fundamentally unable to agree upon a singular target to go after, which was ostensibly at that time was the banks. And then they just kind of like milled around bitching about what they're mad about. And it's like we had the pieces of the spear, but we didn't know how to put the spear together, and we didn't know how to throw it, which is where we need that organization. We need that commonality. But until we get that representative in politics, until we get that whole movement thoroughly represented in politics, it's never going to happen.
Yeah. Also,
unless the people come together.
I just want to point out one more thing, which, not to date this episode, but the person that is president here right now is a reformer, and reformers generally work very gradually. And unfortunately, what we have in the upcoming election is a reformer versus someone who, in my opinion, is going to upend the American experiment. And so it is basically a degenerate con artist versus a nice old guy. Even though they're both old, for some reason, that's more a focus on Biden. And so with those two within the discourse, after we flush that election along and we keep on having a country, maybe we could try and get some sort of more revolutionary ideas and we should have healthcare that covers everyone and things that every other modern country takes for granted. And we have the money to do so. We just need to figure out how to allocate it.
I don't get why, like, America.
Oh, go ahead, Comp. Sorry.
Yeah, that's good. I don't get why America doesn't like try to be like Switzerland. Like, Switzerland, like, the president actually listens to the people. The environment around them.
Two words. Rugged individualism. Americans gonna murk. I think ultimately we have to find a solution. Otherwise, we're just going to repeat history, and eventually the guillotines are going to start coming out.
It seems like history repeats all the time. Like, for some reason, like,
yeah.
In America, especially, like it repeats all the time. Like, it's crazy.
I like it may not repeat, but it often rhymes.
We're seeing. I mean, I see it going one of two ways. Brought it up and yes, Andrew's cost going up due to a new tax and being passed out is an artificial. Assuming who is going to eat that cost is what is artificial. Technically, you are correct, Andrew. And Jeff C brings up unregulated capitalism leads to consumerism and oligarchy. Agreed. And we need to find a solution for that, a social solution for that. Otherwise, we're just going to wind up in our own version of the French Revolution. And instead of the monarchy that's in the guillotines, it's going to be the billionaires of the guillotine. So, You know, I mean, we can keep doing what we've been doing and just run the same shit over and over and over and over and over again, expecting different results, or we can actually try to stand up and do something different. Who knows? I don't know where it's going to go. Likely, I won't see any of this stuff in my lifetime. But I will do my part in my local community to try and push for these things that we desperately need. Yeah.
Why have to at least to step in and just like just to help the average Joes?
Say again.
What if the lead step in and help the average Joes? Like I know the leads don't even care too much about
right.
Especially like Discord, like especially Discord people, bro. Like
it's true.
Don't even talk about
Trolls are having a tough time this year.
All right. So I appreciate you popping up. Economy stuff is always really interesting, and it blends so well into politics. But we do have some other people with their hands up. So I appreciate you coming up, Comp. It's an interesting discussion, and of course, if people have their thoughts, definitely leave them down in the comments on my channel because I'm live streaming this currently. So, but yeah, it's definitely it's a big thing that we can dive into. But I appreciate you coming up, Comp.
Appreciate you.
Thank you, bud. Have a good one.
Have a good one.
All right. We got D-Man with his hand up. Let's invite D-Man up to the stage. Had his hand up for a moment. D-Man, you are invited. Good to see you.
Hey, guys. Hello. Thanks for letting me come up on the stage, I guess.
Absolutely. What do you got for us today?
So I guess I just wanted to respond to the topic because I was like in a different PC and I saw the topic of this. Yeah, to address like the question that what do I believe and why, I want to say that I believe in the God of the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Okay.
And I believe that he is the creator of the universe, because it doesn't make sense to me that the universe could have come from nothing, or it always existed.
First bingo word.
We just believe that it always existed without any sort of like proof that it did.
Well, to address something in there. So you mentioned that you don't think it's I guess it's valid to believe that the universe came from nothing, which is not from my experience, and it's definitely not what I believe in as well. So, but that's a cosmological that references cosmology, the origins of the universe. Now, the evidence that we have is that energy in and of itself can neither be created nor destroyed. And so the energy always existing is not something that people have a problem with. And that this universe is a current state of that energy. Okay, the singularity, if you trace everything back, was also a state of that energy. So the energy was always there, and has always been there, and will always be there. So there's no problem with that. That's what the evidence indicates, that the energy was always there. Now, prior states to the universe, we don't have access to, so we can only hypothesize about them with mathematics. Okay, but that doesn't lend. There's a big gap that you're jumping with the God explanation, that it has to be a God that made these things, when there's no evidence to indicate that there's the existence of this entity in the first place that you have to assume in order to provide it as an explanation. And a question that I have right there is, but you believe in your worldview that your God created everything out of nothing, that it willed it into existence. Correct?
I mean, I'd rather address the first 2 points that you talked about first. But yes, the answer to your question is yes. And I would appreciate it if you could keep it precise.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you say that you have a problem with the something from nothing, obviously that's not what atheists are claiming. That's not what cosmologists are claiming, and that's not what atheism entails, or is even what it is predicated on. So atheism, cosmology, different subjects.
That's fine.
Not interrelated. Okay, so going to your deal, you pointed out that you have a problem with the something from nothing, yet that's what's entailed by your worldview, that there was Allah, and Allah willed everything into existence from nothing.
Okay, so basically,
Right.
Like the first thing that you mentioned was energy cannot be created or destroyed. Right? You
Right.
touched on that. Now, this is what the science tells us. Like we didn't just come to the conclusion that energy cannot be created or destroyed just because that's like a reality that we have to accept. The science shows us that that has to be the case, and that's why we go with it. And this isn't really a set in stone thing. I'm
And
not saying we
yes.
reject the science. We should go with the science because that's what it tells us now. But knowing, when we delve into scientific fields and methodologies and theories, it normally turns out eventually after some time that what we thought about a certain thing to be true turns out that's not the truth. There is a different truth to it, and now we have to disregard what we believed. And obviously, any sane mind would accept the current truth. So this idea that energy always existed is only through, like, we only come to the conclusion using a scientific lens, right? And just so I'm clear, again, I'm not rejecting this idea, but there's still appears to be a window open that this could turn out to be false. Now, I obviously, in my religious paradigm, I don't believe that something that we see within the observable universe, anything that is out there, always existed, right?
Well, no,
And-
the matter that things are composed of has not always existed, because matter is a transitional state of energy, right?
But
So
you're saying energy always existed.
The
so it's the
energy
same
has
thing.
always existed, yes.
So that's
and
saying the same thing then.
No, but well, yeah, because matter and energy are interrelated. So matter is just another form of energy.
So
and that matter returns to energy, energy turns into matter, so on and so forth. And that, but so the problem is that you stated that the likelihood that the laws of thermodynamics will eventually be proven false. Number one, no, like at all, no. That's like saying
this is where I have a problem. Where you now you're making a definitive statement. It would
hang on, D-Man, hang on. No, don't mischaracterize me. I am making a definitive statement about the laws that describe this side of observability.
And
okay,
can I actually add on to what I agree with JL? And can I give you an example of what happens? It's not that something normally turns out to be false. It's that with new and better instruments, with more science, we get a better understanding. For example,
I would appreciate that. Amy, listen.
Hang on, D-Man.
I apologize.
Let her finish. Thank you.
And I appreciate.
I mean, she kind of came into the conversation, but okay.
Oh, because I want to give an example of what I think you're trying to say. Like, it could one day turn out that it can be created or destroyed. But that's really just our understanding right now. It is true that it could change with better science, but let me tell you an example of what I think normally happens. We learn that Newton has his laws of gravity, and this actually gives us great rules for objects like solar systems and apples falling from a tree. But then eventually, something else comes around. We get an even better understanding, and we learn that it's not actually falling in the traditional way. It's actually general relativity that's working on much larger scales, or at least that's what's actually happening when we care about bodies working on much larger scales, like when we're dealing with gravity dipping within a sun. And so it's not that Newton's laws are wrong. It's that now we have an even better understanding, and it's on these different scales we use different metrics.
Yeah, our understanding gets improved over time. It becomes more accurate. So when you say change, that implies the possibility that it could be something completely different than our current understanding, which is like very unlikely. At best, it would be simply become
always think like, guys, I need to talk as well. You guys,
at best, it would become more accurate, is what it would become. Okay, and I had to mute him because he was over talking. So unfortunately, he dipped out. So because I'm not going to let him over talk people. Oh, well.
And I wanted to respect. I truly, I want, a back and forth, and I don't want to dip in before I think someone's had at least a good conversation. But he also asked for a general example, and I think that was kind of illustrating what JL was talking about.
Absolutely, yeah. It's kind of. I understand that he had his points, and I understand that sometimes people feel like they get trapped, but that's not going to justify trying to jump in and overtalk when someone is not. I gave him an opportunity on that. The one thing that I wanted to say, that the most important thing there that individuals like him should remember, is that even if it were the case that at some point in the future, the laws of thermodynamics, we had to throw them away because we had a completely new understanding of the universe. That would not imply that a God exists. That does not imply that a God exists. It wouldn't entail that a God exists, and it certainly wouldn't entail that his Allah exists. So, like Hume himself stated with the Epicurean hypothesis, with the Epicurean hypothesis, is that at best, if you could even if you could even say that you conclude there was an intelligence, it does not say what that intelligence was. So, because there's nothing that bridges that gap. So that's the big thing right there.
One last thing, just because I have them written in notes, but we never got to. And if anyone believes the same thing he does, come on down. Was, he said he believed in the Quran. I have some passages that I think are very silly. So if anyone would like to come on down, defend them. And the universe from nothing. Once again, like JL said, that is something that really comes from theists. You'll never hear an atheist come walking down and say, hey guys, I believe that we came from nothing. That's my true beliefs. We just poof. And yet that seems to be what we get from them over and over and over. And so, yeah, just a few points if any of the theist friends want to come down and defend them since he dipped out.
Absolutely. All right, CJ has got his hand up, or their hand up, sorry. And CJ, you were invited up. Good to see you.
Hey, how's it going?
Good.
Thanks for having me. Quick question. This will be to the three of you. It's maybe an opinion question, but I just want to get your thoughts on it.
Absolutely.
So
go for it.
I've been talking to some religious people, and sometimes when you talk to them, I'll throw a preface to the conversation. I'll say, if you didn't believe this religion, the supernatural claims within it were true, how would your life look? And a lot of times I'll get some thoughts like, well, I would be devastated. I might even self-harm or self-terminate. Life would have no meaning. And, if you're trying to be gentle, maybe practice good street epistemology or something like that, you want to end the conversation. But I'm starting to feel like that's a line. I'm starting to feel like it's just a repeated knee-jerk reaction answer. I always want to consider if somebody's serious when they say that, but
I have a thought on that, which is,
please.
I call this the nihilist approach, and that is, if we get rid of God, why should anything matter? I should basically be running through the streets headshotting people if God doesn't exist, of course. And the only thing that's stopping me from doing this is a guy 2,000 years ago came back from the dead. It's like, okay, I really don't see the connection there. And there are maybe some people who believe that. However, I think that we should counter this. Once we get rid of God, then anything goes, and we're going to be murdering our neighbors, and civilization just crumbles, because it's not really where we get our moralities and our social structures from to begin with.
Right.
Yeah, I'd like, especially when it comes to, would you say the same when it comes to like self-harm or something like that?
Well,
I think.
Oh no, go.
So my understanding on this thing is that, especially when you get into the areas of self-harm and people canceling their subscriptions to the Life channel, the issue is that it comes down to an issue of identity. And so individuals who have been raised in a culture that fundamentally intertwines, or teach them to fundamentally intertwine their personal identity with a concept or an ideology that's been taught to them, has disastrous implications. Because if that individual were to go out into the world and to meet someone who completely unravels their conceptualization, then you inadvertently unravel their identity along with it. And that's where people fall into the very I would say, terrifying notion of people who have suddenly lost the conceptualization of themselves, and now they're just adrift, and they have no anchor whatsoever, and they have no control. And that's where that comes down to, is that people would feel like, you're not just taking my God from me, you're literally taking me from me, which is terrible, a terrifying notion from a psychological perspective. And that is one of the most harmful aspects of religious indoctrination that I've identified, in my work, that it sets these people up to defend these things so hard, because you're not just attacking what they believe, you're attacking who they are as a person. And that's why they get so defensive. And then also because it digs that tick in really super deep, so that it's damn near, it becomes perilous to try and remove it, because you're inadvertently doing harm, which, is, one of the more egregious setups that I think, honestly, Christianity and Islam have really driven in there.
So where would you stand if you heard somebody say what I said? Like, I couldn't deal with it. I would be a nihilist. I would just run through the streets naked. I might even hurt myself. I couldn't even fathom the idea. Would you still continue a conversation with them about religion, debate?
I myself, okay, so in like if those are the extremes that we're dealing with, it would not be conducive to have a conversation like we're having right now here on Discord, or even on my personal channel like that. That individual needs legitimate, dedicated therapy. That's got to be a scenario where there is one person that they can talk with, that you can develop the level of trust that is necessary for the therapy to have any effect, and to identify one of the biggest issues with therapy is that therapy really only works if the individual wants to change, is identified a problem within themselves, they want to change it. So even then, therapy might not work if the person does not want to change themselves. If they haven't recognized that there's an internal problem that they have to reconcile, and they need the therapy to do it. That's very, very dicey territory. I myself would not continue it in this kind of venue. That person needs dedicated, consistent therapy, professional therapy, in order to work through a number of problems, and to work through trying to unwind their personal identity from the ideology that's been taught to them. That you're trying to undo conditioning. It's almost like, like deconditioning from a cult, deprogramming. And that's really, really dangerous business. So I would say only in a professional setting.
And if I could just add on that every once in a while we come across people that say, listen, I am a psychopath. I don't really care about any of you people, and truthfully, I just want to kill some people. But you know what? About a year ago, I fell to my knees and I found my insert Lord and Savior. And this is the one reason that's keeping me from really making a butter knife into an action movie. And the only thing you could say at that point is much of what JL was saying, which is, okay, well, you're right. Maybe we shouldn't be talking about Christianity. Maybe you just need to be talking with a therapist. Now, if that's a debate tactic, it's a horrible debate tactic, because you should be shutting down the conversation, because, well, then it's not an appropriate thing to really say, because clearly that person needs help.
Right. I think there's a point where I think, CJ, you've identified something really, really important, and that is identifying when the conversation can continue safely, that for some individuals it's not safe. And I think that one of the best efforts that individuals like Amy, myself, Ix, and other people who create content is that the best that we can do is kind of lay these ideas out there. Just kind of lay them out there for people to find. And that hopefully these individuals who are in these like really, really scary scenarios where they've been conditioned into these points, that they can find those ideas and maybe do some work themselves, or at least allow them to come to us and engage in the conversation, and allow them to kind of like set the tone, set the pace, work at their own deal instead of trying to force it upon them, to try and be as conducive as possible without being offensive or without attacking their individuality. So like I think where you're this whole thing is really fascinating and very, very important. So I think that you touched on a really, really top topic.
Yeah, it's tough because I mean, I don't think I've actually talked to a Christian or a Muslim where I asked them that question and they answered with something like, "Oh, it would be I would accept it. It would just be true, and I would leave the religion. It would be fine." They usually default to that extreme answer, but I can only take what they say as being true in regards to their self-reporting. I mean, I highly doubt they're going to self-harm and all that, but you kind of have to assume that you never know.
Right, exactly. Yeah, you got to take it on a case-by-case basis has been what I found. And you know, there's a level of unpredictability. You don't know how the individual is going to react. I've brought Theist onto my channel to have conversations, and one that went really well was with the dude named Gospelologian, who's a Calvinist and really, really hardcore. And we came to a point where we can agree to disagree, you know, just on the social implications of what he believes and stuff like that. But then I had another dude on, Dr. Whisper, or what was it? Dr. I can't remember what his name is, but when he got challenged, he went full on screaming proselytizing on my channel because that's all he had, because that's how interwoven he is, you know, because he couldn't even respond coherently. It was just immediately start preaching from the Bible. Like, wow. So you take it case by case. I myself try to really remember, you know, the power that I can have in conversations and try to temper. I used to be kind of like, you know, fuck you, punch you in the gut. Here's where you're dumb. I had that kind of very asinine and very juvenile approach. And as the years have gone by, I've learned you're never going to get anywhere, you know, just like throwing in someone's face how, you know, like how ignorant they may be. That's not going to accomplish anything. In fact, you'll likely do more harm than good. So I try to really temper myself and remember that just because I have the power to, you know, wreck ideas or tear them down or help people deconstruct doesn't mean that I can just swing it willy-nilly and, you know, be like, ha, you know, because what am I then doing? You know, I'm just masturbating for all intents and purposes.
Yeah. Great points. I have to head out, but thanks for your thoughts. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you, CJ. And a great topic, man. I wish I could do, Amy, I mean, we could do an entire live stream. I know Ix would jump in there as well on just that alone, you know?
No, I agree. I think that it's hard because there are some people that are truly stuck in a situation where, you know, they've had some sort of trauma, basically from something like hell. And then you have something like this, where we almost have a moral dilemma about should we even deconvert them for the sake of the debate when it could do something like self-harm. Once again,
Right.
We have to take people at their word. However, the other one thing that I want to put out there is we generally do outbound calls, and that is to say that we don't go out looking for people. We generally invite people to come to us. And so it's not kind of trying to force our views, but we say, come on. And if you think that you have a way to convince us, well then, baby, bring it on.
Yep. All right. I like this. We're going at a pretty good clip. Reverse, I see you in there. I hope you got your sound issue out. Karis has had their hand up for a bit. In Reverse, we will get to you. I will bring you up because I like talking with you. So, but Karis has had their hand up. So let's invite Karis up to the stage. Karis.
Hello. Hope sounds coming through all right.
Yes, you sound good. Coming in good. So, what do you got for us today?
I believe the current concept of God, as we understand now, is more akin to a mass delusion than it is anything else.
Of what we have in today's society?
Society, yes. The best way I can analogy to is I don't know if you're about the Slenderman cases a few years back.
Yes. That took place up in New York. Yes.
Yeah, that's what I came to. There's a story that went around, and then people then adopt that story and then form that belief based on the story. thus then it became self-propagating, and then it became more of its own entity, in a sense.
Well,
Right.
I can just say that what happened with Judaism is that it was an oral tradition, and they believe that writing actually was heretical about some beliefs up until the point of about Second Temple Judaism, when they thought that their beliefs were going to be threatened and destroyed. And so they started to write things down. Once you start to write things down, we have the birth of fundamentalists who say, listen, you can't change it from one guy to the next guy, or you didn't like how the audience reacted here. Now we have, well, it says so in a book, and if you don't like it, I actually have a sword over here, and we can disagree to agree.
Yeah, that's from. I mean, I've read the Bible because I was raised Church of England when I was younger, and I've read through the Bible. And on the face of it, a lot of it, they're just stories based on some kind of morals. Like Exodus, for example, is basically telling the king not to abuse his people, or they will leave. Now, over the time, particularly the church, when they re-edited the Bible, I think it's around the 4th century they redid it, completely changed the concept of what the book meant. Then it became, as a lot of people say, it's a binding text now that you must believe in.
Right.
But I think it's caused a lot of problems over the years. My personal belief, anyway.
Yeah, I can definitely see. Definitely see how you can come to that particular conclusion. I myself, I mean, I understand the idea of it being almost appearing to us today as kind of a mass delusion in that respect. I think that what we see today, how I would kind of like conclude it, is that it's really that we have the outcome of a history of heavy conditioning towards a number of bad things like anti-intellectualism and overall just general laziness, and of course personal validation. That in the wake of understanding, or because the way I've always seen it, trying to determine one's personal meaning or whatever, or their purpose for themselves, okay, self-actualizing into the world is a difficult process. It's very, very hard. Okay, you have to go through a lot of steps. You have to be willing to fail. You cannot be afraid of that failure. You cannot be afraid of being wrong. You have to understand that being wrong is not a weakness. It's a position of strength, because then you're in a position to learn more. You have to be willing to fall, essentially just like learning how to walk. You have to be willing to fall in order to learn to walk. In order to self-actualize, you have to be willing to stumble and learn and progress in order to understand who you are and what you want and how you want to live your life. And then you have to go out into the world of 8 billion people and fight for your own validation that way. That's difficult. That is to epic quantities. What religion does is it removes all of that and says, here's this thing that gives you all that stuff. You don't even have to work for it. All you have to do is accept that it's true. And we reinforce that by telling you what information not to listen to, what people not to interact with, what things not to do, controlling your behavior and the information you take in and the way you think and the way you feel. You have the Hassan bite model down to a T. And then when you control all this stuff, here's this thing. This is what gives you value. This is what it is. Don't question it. Don't challenge it. Whatever. And here's the society that comes along with it and all the support structures. But the minute you start challenging it, it all goes away. It all crumbles. So it's this constant historical conditioning that creates individualistic tribes that are self-supporting. That is the easiest way to get about. You know, it provides safety in numbers. It provides personal value. It provides all the things you need. You know, there's a social utility there. And that why do anything more? And so people fall into that. And, you know, it progresses, it evolves, just like we were talking about memetics before. And then over time, things change. We get different families of Christianity, different, denominations of Protestantism. And then we get other things playing their roles. But ultimately, is it true? How dangerous can it become? But yeah, I see that this mass conditioning towards, for lack of a better term, towards laziness and fear.
Yeah, but also, I'm using the same guidelines. you can also see that kind of effect starting to happen now, like with social media, a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I think the Christian religious groups themselves are now using it, because social media lends itself to that same kind of concept a lot of the time.
Agreed.
A lot of people find validation from the bottom, and then fall into a social hierarchy of how much you validate that chosen person you follow. Which I think is leading more into it.
What we see on social media is really just a reflection of what we see in regular humanity, speed of light, because that's how fast information travels, and we see it happening in far greater doses, because once you ramp up this spread of information, you will see the outcome of the spread of that information rather quickly, in concordance with how fast that information is traveling. So at a time when information traveled as fast as people could walk, or even sometimes as a bird can fly or whatever. But at that time, you'll see these things very far. You'll see these little tribes very far apart. Not a lot of challenges to what they believe, and so they get established. They firm up and whatever. But nowadays, we're just basically seeing human history play out in social media, just at a much faster rate. Which means that the evolution of those ideas will also mutate faster as well. So just a repetition of stuff that we've done in the past.
I mean, yeah, I've seen that because I've seen a lot more what I don't know what you call them weird Christian churches which have some kind of very skewed version of the Bible, like the snake dancers from back in the 80s. I've seen a lot more of those churches type pop up recently, particularly on like Facebook and Twitter and all that. It's actually more slightly worrying how fast they're appearing and growing in our side than there's anything else. I mean, I've never liked religion from the get-go from when I was young, because I think religion's inherently dangerous as a concept. Because, again, like I say, it devoids people of thinking for themselves and not understanding actions have consequences. It's the verbal, I was a state in the Bible, he without sin cast the first stone type concept, where unfortunately nowadays everyone believes that they are without sin and more willing to cast that stone at people. If that makes any sense to anybody.
Yeah, I follow you, definitely. Absolutely.
And I think that's inherently dividing in our society right now, where, given the state of the current world, division is not really something we need more of.
I would agree with that. I would agree that it creates more social division that is necessary. That an ancient concept that had utility in our most primitive years, or in our ancient years, that helped to keep people together into groups for the and survival was a positive outcome of that. Something that had that kind of utility, a social construct that had the utility. Nowadays, in a time when there are no like surviving tribes, trying to survive from day to day, where information moves at the speed of light and everybody is, virtually has the ability to be on the same page, that these things don't do us any service now, other than creating additional layers of tribalism that only creates societal division where there need not be any. And so I see an old concept that had use we have now outgrown its use, and now all it does, it's a hanger on that just creates more division it stymies conversation. That's all it is. So,
yeah, I mean,
yeah.
I think my big, I noticed from, because like say I'm about 37 now. Like I noticed from like the 90s, where a lot of these, you see churches now on TV trying to get donations. That died quite off until the internet became one of those things that was readily available. And then people got lazy again, instead of like going to the library looking for information. Google came out, which is a great tool. Don't get us wrong. But it's also because it's based on an algorithm that just pushes whatever's popular.
Right.
A lot of people find it, and believe me, best concept I would give that one to this current time is current war between Palestine and Israel. If you can really call it a war, to be honest. There's a lot of information out there, but no one can verify what's true and what's not true half the time.
Right.
I think it's getting the same way with religion. It's no, my book's better than yours, and it's creating more and more divide in between people supposedly believe the same thing, also getting into conflicts with each other.
Also, I could solve that war. I know it's been going on a little, and I know a random person on the internet. It's true. But if you just took out this little thing, I don't know if anyone's heard of it, but it's called religion. And everyone's like, Amy, you can't simplify it that easy. You need to come up with this complex solution. There has to be something. There has to be some reason that we're avoiding and missing and can't get a grasp of for why these two countries are telling them that God gave us land. We'll never know.
I mean, that's true. I mean, before I can tell, when I used to do some research on the Bible and stuff, if I can tell the 3 books involved in the conflict with Jerusalem all stem from the exact same source. These got changed in understanding later on down the line. I think somewhere around the Jesus period and some of the prophets that came around. That's when most of the books then divide off from each other, as far as I can tell. I don't know if you agree with that concept or not, but that's how far I can see. Because a lot of the base stories in them books are exactly the same.
They're all fan fiction off the others.
They use it to beat you with the head with constantly for the past 2 odd years.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I think we're on the same page, Karis. We really are. I agree with you on that. And I also agree with Amy in that it really, if you take religion out of it, this idea that, arbitrary places on the earth were put here specifically for us, and without diving into the geopolitics and the history of the current conflict going on over in the Middle East, which is just fucking asinine as shit. More so in the favor of one group than the other. I don't know if I should throw those out there because I don't know how people react to it, but nonetheless, but yeah, it's when it comes down to it, it's all bullshit in my opinion. It really is,
Yeah, I mean, thanks for letting us up. Thanks for the chat.
Thank you, Karis. You have a great one, bud.
You too, mate.
All right. I see Reverse is back. Hopefully Reverse got his audio sorted. Reverse. Now I may still having trouble hearing you, bud.
Hello?
Hey, there he is.
Hi.
I can see my voice going, but I can't hear you guys. Let me try and pull up YouTube again.
Well, we can hear you, but he can't hear us.
Hello?
Don't pull up YouTube. It would be a Discord thing.
Oh, come on.
Yeah, that would be a Discord thing. I don't know why you're not
Let's see.
from us.
Every time I go back to it just closes the YouTube and stops it from playing. I don't know what was going on. I could hear you guys earlier.
Can you hear us now? That would be a no.
Oh, shoot.
I was gonna say it's hard, maybe.
Why can't I hear y'all?
We don't. We don't
Very
know.
Specifically, it's because God does not want you to hear us. Dun, dun, dun.
Let's see. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Good. Also, wait, that was never the problem to begin with.
Yeah.
I guess it was a while ago, but
While Reverse is taking care of that, thank you very much to Tanya. I appreciate that compliment. And my background is specifically in forensic psychology and a number of other areas. Kind of I like a lot of stuff, but predominantly my education is in forensic psychology and.
It's on like a delay of 40 seconds. It won't let me get any closer.
yeah, because you're watching the YouTube.
Well, shoot. I just don't know.
This is a conundrum.
I'm
Can
sorry,
Bob
bud.
fix it? Maybe.
Yeah, it seemed like it was working.
It did, even with the 40-second delay.
Cool, Tanya. All right.
In the future reverse, just know, or at least 40 seconds from now, I want you to all know we think you're amazing. This might not work, but
yeah, I'm sorry, Reverse. Well, okay, so while Reverse is handling that, if anybody else in the chat, or if anybody else here, has something on their mind, they want to put their hand up if they want to talk about the god or gods that they believe in, why they believe in them, and have that conversation where we really would look forward to that. But of course, the topic is open to pretty much anything. Of course, if you have commentary on something that also we've talked about earlier today.
Oh, well. Yeah, I don't know what's going on. It looked like it.
Well, I know you'll probably get this in a few seconds. So, but yeah, sorry, Reverse. It's all good. Hopefully you can get that sorted out. Everybody can hear you, but you just can't hear us is the issue. So yeah, he popped back down. So hopefully he can get that sorted. I don't know. I honestly don't know what the issue is there. I really don't. Everybody can hear him, but except for he can't hear any of us. Kind of a bummer. All right, man, we're we're about 15 away from 1 o'clock. And we don't have any hands up in the audience. So one thing I want to do one thing I also want to do, Ix, I don't know if you're still there, Ix. He may have stepped away because I kind of wanted to hear his thoughts on that because obviously now that I have some people on the stage with me here, Amy, unfortunately, a couple of days ago on the 19th, we lost another member of the Four Horsemen. Daniel Dennett has passed away.
Great loss.
And I talked about it. I made about how influential his work was, and a number of his books were to my own work. And I was kind of curious if y'all had some thoughts.
He changed my life.
I know Ix just ran back, so I'm handing it over to Ix. I'll talk after.
No, I mean, I'll just say he changed my life. Go ahead, Amy.
Oh no.
I can go.
I just think that he was the softer spoken, I think, of the Four Horsemen. I think he was a very cordial human being, and so he should be commended for that, while also pushing forward not only just for normalization of atheism, but he has been influential with his work within consciousness and whether we have things like qualia. He, just like Richard Dawkins coined meme, he coined the term qualia. Qualia really deals with what it means to have a conscious experience. I go 50-50 on it. However, it is an interesting thing to think about, especially if you're interested in consciousness. And so sending a lot of love to Daniel Dennett's family, a lot of love for everything that he's given us and his continued works that we can use in our skeptic community. Thank you, Daniel Dennett.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Ix. Sorry.
I was going to say that's a great tribute. I'll just say, yeah, one of the reasons Dennett's known for the term qualia is because he's a skeptic about its existence. And I didn't come across Dennett through the Horseman phenomena. I was studying cognitive science, and he was the person I was most excited to see speak. I got to attend his lecture at my school, and I'd been reading his books hungrily ever since I started getting into the field. And what I found was that there were other writers like Marvin Minsky of the Society of Mind and Chomsky and just a lot of different people in the field of AI that were interesting, but a lot of them they drank the Kool-Aid on a lot of issues that they just took for granted. And Dennett was willing, in Consciousness Explained, to say something really rather shocking that he knew was going to upset people and kind of be controversial. But I think he felt it needed to be said. And he explained it with a magic trick. And this is the actual lecture that I attended in person. I got to see him in the flesh, which to me was kind of like seeing a rock star of science. He said, "Look, every time I do a talk about consciousness or how this stuff all might work, there are people who come up to me and say, 'That's crazy. You're saying that consciousness doesn't exist or something.' And I say, 'Well, kind of. And one of my critics wrote a thing that they thought was very nasty about my latest book, Consciousness Explained, which I liked so much that I put on the jacket of the book as an endorsement. They said,
Nice.
quote, Daniel Dennett is the devil. He would have you believe that there is no Cartesian theater of the mind in which a conscious observer experiences the world. He would have you believe that there is no theater in which the Cartesian observer could observe such a thing. He would even have you believe that consciousness itself is a kind of user illusion in the same sense that centers of gravity exist in Newtonian mechanics, but you can't really point to any particular thing that they represent. They're merely an abstraction for a kind of narrative center of gravity in the brain, which Dennett thinks explains why we believe in the experience of consciousness. And Daniel Dennett smiles and he says, I love it when critics steal man and actually accurately portray my view. And this critic perfectly expressed my view, that I do think consciousness exists in the sense that any of the illusions exist and are apparent to us when we look at them. But the best explanation for how consciousness works is that it's like a magic trick that a magician used to do that stumped all the other magicians. Every year at the magician competition, just like Penn and Teller's bullshit, where they try to stump each other, no one could figure this trick out. And finally, the magician said, look, I'm old. This is the last book I'm going to publish. I don't want to die and leave the trick unexplained. So I'll just tell you why you could never figure it out. The trick is called the tuned deck. And the reason you can never figure it out is because it has a magic word in the name of the trick. And you have a 1 in 3 chance of getting it right. Can you guess what the magic word is in the name the tuned deck? Anyone? Take a guess. You have a 1 in 3 chance.
Deck.
It is not deck. You have 2 in 3 chance. You're correct. You're actually one of the only people who's ever said that. It's always the last word that anyone picks because it seems like the least.
I was going to pick the other one. My other one was going to be the wrong one too, so I'm glad JL said it.
So in a term, like when you talk about a noun, it seems like the is the least significant digit in the number, right? But what it actually turns out is that what he was doing every time he did the trick is he would say, I'm going to perform a trick called the tuned deck. I am going to tune to these cards. And he would make a big show of psychically tuning to them. And you may take any card you wish. You may take any precaution you like to stop me from tuning, but you will be unable to prevent me from tuning to the deck. And I will tell you which card you picked. Take any precaution you like. And so every year they would swap the deck. They would have uncooperative witness lie to him. They would use hidden cameras. They did thing after thing, and they could never catch him and stump the trick. So finally he said, look, the word the made you believe that I was doing the same trick every time. Obviously, I'm misdirecting you somehow with the name of the trick. The name of the trick implies there's one trick, but there's actually 7 different tricks, and I rotate them based on whichever precaution you use. So if you use the cameras, or if you use the things, or if you use the last time, I predict which one you're going to try next, and I just do the one you checked for last year. So there are actually 7 things that make up the tuned deck, all of which you already knew. They're all well-known tricks, right? The tricks that you've all done. But because I combined them and I gave them a big fancy name, you thought it was the most amazing trick ever and that it was unsolvable. This is what David Chalmers has done with the hard problem of consciousness. And what I'm saying in the Consciousness Explained book is I'm saying that telling people that it's some big, magic, ineffable, what it's like to be a bat, as Thomas Nagel put it, is actually a huge misdirect that just confuses people about studying the numerous and difficult, but not truly hard problem of consciousness in a unitary sense. It's actually a number of different problems, all of which we're studying to various degrees, some of which we understand really well, and the belief that it's one thing called consciousness just confuses the matter. So he's not saying we don't have experiences and that we don't experience all these neat phenomena. He's just saying that the word consciousness isn't helpful in actually studying all of these different things.
Nice.
Yeah.
And real quick, before we bring Verse back up real quick, I just want to ask real quick, my absolute favorite of his books, because it was so it influenced me, was Breaking the Spell, because that right there solidified for me that we have to be willing to challenge these notions, and that it was acceptable and okay, and actually that it was paramount that we do so. And so I found that at a time when I kind of like needed that. So it really, really spoke to me, because it was at that moment where I was kind of like, you know, how, like, should we do these things? Should we challenge? Should we shake these foundations? And the answer was, to paraphrase, was absolutely we must. It is imperative that we do so. It's almost a duty. And so that was important to me. Amy, Ix, do you have your own favorite Dennett book? Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Are you deciding? Okay. Sorry.
Well,
You first.
I was gonna say, I'm like most people. I have read something more like Breaking the Spell. I think that it's more important to talk about skepticism, not more, but then once we have people on board science, then yeah, I'm gonna hand it over to X. But then I also have something to talk about Mary's room.
Oh yeah, the argument that he no longer believes in.
Yes. Oh well. No.
I mean, Frank Jackson. Frank Jackson doesn't. Yeah, he's a skeptic about his own argument, which is funny. That's a good topic. I look forward to that. Okay, but I just wanted to say my favorite books are the science books. So
Nice.
Consciousness Explained is very important, and it kind of gave a foundational approach to those who are trying to build a research program to understand how the brain actually works, how artificial intelligence reverse engineers and reproduces some of its competencies, and how neuroscience allows us to then test those predictions and use those tools from AI to better understand what the brain does in the most productive research program that's been the most rapid advance of the last 15 or 20 years. We're now at the point where it's just AI. That's because of people who read books like Consciousness Explained and just weren't intimidated at all by this so-called hard problem stuff. And the Mysterians is what we call the people who think that there's some kind of in-principle impossibility theorem that will say we'll never understand the brain, or it's in principle or we just don't have the technology or something. All those Mysterian views are understandable because the brain is the most complicated thing we've ever studied. But Consciousness Explained just laid it out and said, look, it's not a hard problem. There's no such thing as consciousness, really. What there are is a lot of things which we call consciousness because that's how humans experience life. But obviously, every species that's ever evolved is going to have a slightly different thing that maybe isn't technically consciousness, but it does like a Venn diagram of the same things. What we really have are competencies, and competencies can be understood in a kind of Venn diagram like way rather than this so-called consciousness thing. And he wrote another book called The Intentional Stance, which just kind of demolishes this like, oh, how does a neuron have an intention? Molecules can't have feelings. Like, I've got into so many philosophical debates with people on Discord in the debatosphere where they double down on the impossibility of neuroscience having any role in their philosophy of mind. And these are smart people who know more philosophy than I do, but they're a priori idealists about the mind. They just think the mind is this like abstract thing. Science can in principle never give anything more meaningful than some kind of internal perspective. And they just don't even want to hear about neuroscience.
Right.
So intentional stance just kind of blows apart that whole Mysterian attitude. And the intentional stance has a really memorable line. He says, watching a room full of philosophers and scientists argue about how to solve the hard problem in terms of why intentions can only be explained through consciousness is like watching a room full of people try to unlock a door that's not, or try to break down a door that's not even locked, right? And
sure,
there's
they're trying to solve a problem that is not there. Probably
right.
not there.
Right. And there's I could give a more detailed argument, but that's beyond the scope of this. Just read The Intentional Stance. And then he has another book called From Bacteria to Bach and Back.
Yeah, I knew you were going to cite that one. I had a feeling.
Yeah,
I did.
And that's about the neo-Darwinian kind of take from Dawkins's Selfish Gene book with the concept of the meme, all the way through to how did consciousness evolve? How did we get the brains that we have? Can we take away some conjectures about the likely evolutionary psychological developments of the brain that are going to be explanatory to how we understand how the brain works now and how consciousness and culture develops in the future. And I think he has one idea in there that's really useful, which is the idea of a what does he call it? A free floating rationale. So a free floating rationale is like a reason for something being the way that it is, which is, it seems teleological. It seems like this thing knows what it's doing. Like if you look at ants do incredible organizational feats that a corporation full of highly paid individuals would struggle to replicate, given the same resources and all the know-how of modern corporate psychology and sort of organizational practice. The ants have no idea what they're doing conceptually. They just do things based on rules that evolved in them based on chemical signals, right? But the ant hive behaves as though it knew what it was doing to a very high level of intelligence, because the rationale for why the ant hive does what it does isn't tethered to an individual's consciousness. There is no place that understands what ants do. But when we look at ants, we can see this incredibly intricate, sophisticated rationale for why they do what they do. And that's what biology does. That's what people like Fodor just don't understand about, like the way in which natural selection is used as a lens for a whole family of theoretical explanations, which are not, they're not summarized by, oh, natural selection, the end. But people like Fodor strawman evolutionary psychology and biology and evolution in general as it's practiced by saying that natural selection is like a meaningless theory, despite the fact that he actually predicts all the same things that natural selection predicts. He just doesn't like the word. That's a very rigorous defense of the use of memetics, because memetics became unfashionable for a while. Like people stopped using memetics as a term because they were made fun of, and people would say, "Oh, it's just cultural development," or "It's just, you know, heritable, cultural, blah blah blah." They would make up all these words to avoid saying the word meme, because they were offended by this new sort of Richard Dawkins style approach to cultural psychological phenomena. And historians didn't like it. Cultural people didn't like it because it was their turf. They wrote all the books. They had all the PhDs, and they didn't want people to use biological analogies for the stuff that they were the experts of, basically. And the last one is he just wrote a memoir, which now is going to be very poignant, which is I've Been Thinking. That's his final thoughts of his whole life and his whole career and what he wants to leave us with. So that's what I'm going to read. I'm going to buy that today, and it's going to be bittersweet because I wanted to meet this guy so badly in person and just to do more than hear his lecture from across the room.
Can I ask you guys what you think about, so very specifically when it comes to the Mary's Room experiment, because I know he talked about it, and I know that you said he changed his mind, and I kind of...
He did. The one who wrote the thought experiment.
Oh, who actually wrote it.
Frank Jackson does not believe in his own thought experiment. He did it to illustrate and work out the problem, and once he thought he understood it, he was like, "Hey guys, like it's over. Like this is not hard to understand. It just, we had to think about it a bit."
Well, I have a way of thinking about it that I think I kind of agree with getting over it, which would be, so if for those who don't know, it's Mary in the hypothetical lives in a world where it's just black and white. There's no color, but she is the world's expert in knowing not only a color, but like the color red. And she just knows every fact about it. She has read every book about it. And then all of a sudden, one day, she enters the world and she sees the color red. What did she learn? And the nebulous answer is, so she sees the color red. That really isn't the what does she see. What she ends up seeing is, hey, maybe there's a stop sign, and it's the color red. And so it's not that she's learned something new. It's not that there's a new fact about red. It's that red has now become an indicator and a separator for how we sort our data. And we go, okay, this object is that quality. It is the quality of red. We have receptors to pick up on that. And so I do think that there are answers to this solution, which is what did she learn? Well, if you just say what did she learn about red, well, she didn't learn anything new about red. But if it's an object and she's learning about it in the real world, then she has learned something. She has learned about something new that has that quality.
Right. All right. Reverse Camus says he's got his audio sorted. Reverse, can you hear us?
Right.
Yes, I can.
There he is.
Hold on, before we change subjects, can I just tell you what Frank Jackson's solution to his own thought experiment was?
Yeah, what's up?
So Frank Jackson came to understand it in terms of representation. So knowledge, like Amy was saying, is a fact about the world. Experience, and you don't have to use the word qualia to just talk about experience. Dennett doesn't use the word qualia. He just thinks it doesn't exist. It's a misnomer for experience. But experience is something where if let's say that there's one fact and the fact is, I don't know, red. If I look at the red next to some blue, the red looks different than if I look at the red next to some yellow, right? And so there's all these facts about how color adjacent to the color we're looking at is going to change our experience about it, right? Now you could say that there's like an infinity of facts about how each color affects each other color, but what you actually get is an absurd explosion where there's just an infinity of like ridiculous microfacts about microfacts. And you can't really formulate these as facts. They're not facts. What they are is raw sense data, right? So an experience is the totality of all the things coming through your sensory organs, and it's the totality of all the sort of response, second order reactions that are triggered by it. Experience is this complete total process that you undergo physiologically. And there's the part that you think about that's the memory consciously, but it's this whole chain of how your body's affected by some sensory experience. The part that's the fact is that light has a certain wavelength, right? And unless you're going to be committed to thinking there's an infinity of infinitely minute facts about everything all the time, it doesn't really make sense to call sense data experience. Otherwise, there would be a fact about every pixel of every screen that has ever been rendered. There'd be a fact about every blur between the pixels. There'd be a fact about the blur between the blur between the blur of the pixels. You're just committed to like an infinitism of absurd facts. We can just separate. There's the representation of a fact, which is how we experience it, and the fact we're experiencing is the wavelength of the light. Which, if Mary understands all the physical facts about color, if she's a color scientist and a neuroscientist and a physicist, she knows literally every physical fact, everything that physics could tell us about color, then she would already know the brain state that she would have when she experiences color. That would be something she could predict, and there'd be no new information, no new data about how the world is. She would just have some sense data that's representing it to her. But there's an infinity of representations about everything that you can't really pin down as facts. So it's not knowledge. And that's how Frank Jackson kind of dissolved the whole experiment.
Nice. All right, reverse. We got. Oh yeah, and by the way, the last thought on that, my life said, yeah. So, you know, Dr. Dennett's death is a devastating loss for the skeptic community. It's true. I never got the chance to meet him myself, which would have been really, really awesome. But he's left his body of work for us, so hopefully more people will dive into those. But yeah, all our love and thoughts are going out to his family and his friends. So you know, the way that, but he left a great body of work for us to fall back on. So, reverse, what do you got for us today, bud?
Like, I guess what immediately comes to my mind is just how frustrating it can be talking with other theists, especially Christians. Like, because, like, especially on some of the channels, they're like, Christianity is the only worldview that is internally consistent. So if I'm a different religion than them, like, it makes them look inconsistent. So I end up getting muted when I try and explain myself.
Your argument is that Christianity is internally consistent?
No. Or wait, I didn't quite get what you said.
Are you talking
Are
about
you-
precept? Sounds
are
like
you
you're talking about talking to precepts.
You're saying you talk to people who assert this.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Hmm.
But yeah, like I agree with it. It sounds like you're like when you're talking presuppositional apologists who that smacks of their argumentation that intelligibility itself, is not possible unless these things exist, which is just absurd. But
Mhm.
so you're saying that you getting shut down because you have a different viewpoint, correct?
Yeah.
That's, I mean, it's with like I said, this kind of goes back to what I said, that religion and the various permutations, all they do today is create societal division where there need not be any, and it's all tribalism and just self-validation, self-validating echo chambers. I don't know. I personally feel that like presuppositional apologetics is a dying form, that only its most staunch adherents or its most strident adherents are the ones that are going to keep screaming at the loudest from the mountaintops. But I think they're slowly but surely recognizing that nobody's really listening, because it's well understood why it fails, that it fails on the most simplest things, and that people kind of like don't need it anymore. But yeah, you're going to find a lot of that in these echo chambers here on Discord. You will.
Yeah, the only way that presuppositionalism can survive is if you have admin powers, apparently.
Mhm. Yeah. If you're an admin, you can get your presup in before them. So you constantly got the other person on the defense.
Yes. They don't also accept things like I don't know, which is actually generally the thing you should do when you not only don't know something, but in many of these questions that are the scientific frontiers, like abiogenesis, or the question of like necessary for a Big Bang, which may be the improper formation of that question to begin with. And when you say I don't know, I mean, a physicist can say I don't know, and they still won't accept it, but you can get muted, and that may be why it's not surviving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was listening to them talk to one atheist, and they were like, how do you know anything? And they went on with that for like 10 minutes. And that's just basically the script to me, so I was trying to point that out. But every time they said, I know stuff because of, I guess, my brain, they just say, how do you know that?
Yes,
And
very
it just goes around.
specifically what makes everything coherent, because it's a very odd question, and when you ask a lay person that, they're like, wow, that's English, and yet I really haven't thought of that. And yet each and every time that sort of question goes back to a medical, biological, physical, that's our brain that makes us understand that sentence. And I always have what I call the Wendy's test. And the Wendy's test only seems to annoy them, but it pleases me because they're presups. And so the Wendy's test is, how can you get me? I'm in Wendy's and I want to know the price of a hamburger. I want you to use Christianity. Find me a price of a hamburger.
Yeah.
It never seems to work.
Yeah, I find that it ultimately just, especially with presup, it's just designed to shut the other person down. Ix was talking about it before. We were talking about, how Van Til himself was pretty much at a point conceded that it really is just about stymieing the conversation or shutting it down entirely, because Van Til, the guy who kind of like thought all this bullshit up, Van Til's ultimate goal was to provide a justification for people staying in the faith and not questioning it. Is all it was. It was about keeping people in the faith. And that's because Van Til had a very particular sense of what version of Christianity was correct. And he was
not a particular set of skills.
And he was a hardcore conservative. And so he felt that progressive Christianity led to a greater led to an incline in people leaving the faith, because it allowed people to ask questions. It entertained those questions as though they were valid, and it explored these concepts and realized how they fail at certain points. And now he believed that when the institution becomes progressive, that gives more leverage for people to wind up leaving it. And so he held to this very, very strict, very, very hardcore, version that did not allow for that. In fact, developed a reason, or developed what he thought was a reason to keep people in the faith instead of converting more people into the faith, because that just wasn't going to work. And if you notice that through his lifetime, every time he was with a particular institution, that if he found it, like when he was with Stanford, is that as he saw the institution growing more progressively, he would just leave and he'd go somewhere else. He ran from progressive thought because it was just anathema to his very identity, until eventually he set up the whole Westminster thing, which is what we kind of happens here on Discord. If you can't be a part of the larger system and maintain your own thoughts and fight for those thoughts, if you don't want to do that, then you just run somewhere else and create your echo chamber there. And that's where the whole Westminster thing came from. Is that was his echo chamber with him and the other the faculty that helped to found that. So, because everywhere else was becoming more progressive in thought, and he didn't like that. But there's a reason why he ostensibly lost that debate against Clark, because, when it comes down to it, for lack of a better phrase, Van Til was full of shit. And everyone else knew it, except that, he was so popular at the time that they weren't ready to just dump his ass. But he lost that debate against Clark because Clark identified where he was wrong and the mistakes that he was making. And the church recognized that. So Van Til, not the towering intellect that a lot of people think that he is, or think that he was. Good.
Yeah, I don't know any of these people.
The Van Til Clark is a really fascinating read when you dive into that, and basically two guys who believe kind of the same thing arguing over as to whose version is the best. And ultimately, Van Til wanted to have this debate because he wanted to see Clark excommunicated from the church, because his ideas were, in his eyes, too progressive and allowed for too much wiggle room for people to wind up leaving the faith. He felt that Clark was a threat to the Reformed movement. But the higher ups, I guess the powers that be at that time, did not side with Van Til, and Clark was not excommunicated. Because they recognized that Clark was right in what he was trying to convey during that whole. It's really fascinating shit. Just because when there's no atheists around, ostensibly these individuals will eat each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've definitely experienced that, to the extent that I don't even say that I'm a Baha'i, but like, if they ask me a direct question, if I'm a Christian, like, I've got to answer honestly, but it always ends up with them debating me on why I believe something different when they think that their belief is the only internally consistent one.
Right. There's, it's interesting that you bring this up, because I've seen in conversations that theists have amongst each other, especially those that hold to different ideas of Christianity or however, whatever permutation that there is that it ultimately comes down to not that are you a Christian, but what kind of Christian are you? And I find this really fascinating because there's a new movie coming out, because people know that I'm big on movies, called Civil War, which is about a possible future civil war here in America between the varying states or whatever. And there's this fascinating scene that actor Jesse Plemons, who is married to Kirsten Dunst, Jesse Plemons came into the scene where he asks that question, but from a political standpoint, where it's not that it's not about that we're all Americans. Where Jesse Plemons posed the question, but what kind of American are you? And I'd love that. That's a political sense. But it's the very same thing that's going on in religious circles today. And it's still going on. It's been going on time immemorial. It all comes down to, but what kind are you? Does it ultimately it doesn't matter that y'all kind of believe the same tenets, but ultimately, what are the little minutia that you're going to draw the lines, hills you die on, and it ultimately comes down to the person. Do they want to be affiliated with you? And so they're trying to figure out what kind of person you are and if you fit into the echo chamber. And so we see that across all spectrums in everything. It's like, well, he's like, oh, you're a scientist. Well, what kind of scientist are you? You're a musician. Well, what kind of musician are you? Oh, you're an artist. What kind of artist are you? You know, and shit like that. Yeah, and I just find it really fascinating that the social, you know, things spread across the whole spectrum.
Hmm.
I like that. Yeah, like this. Someone in the live chat here said, you know, Vic says, "What kind of you're an atheist? Well, what kind of atheist are you?" And I'm kind of like, "Well, it's wild because it bears thought, but you know, how much thought does it really bear? You know, or what is the implication of asking that question? Is that how have you broken this up, and how do you justify breaking it up into these little like tribes, and like why have you broken it up? How have you broken it up? What justifies the breaking it up into that? You know, it's like oh well, I'm a new atheist. It's like, well, what does that entail? You know, and ultimately it's really and it gets down to the subjectivity, how we all subjectively interpret these things, which I think is interesting. I just think it's funny when it happens around theists who all claim that, who pretty much claim that they have an objective viewpoint of reality and are able to make absolute claims about what is real, which I just think is hilarious.
Hmm. Yeah, a lot of the time, I feel like I do have to revert to the I don't know on a lot of questions related to God, because I don't know its nature. Like I had someone talking to me like she was a hardcore monist, and I was like, maybe that's right, but I don't know exactly how God works in relation to the universe, so I can't say for sure.
Yeah, there's these questions, and it was a bummer because we had Otangelo. Otangelo came in and put his hand up for him, and then he ran away, which really bums me out because, you know, he walked that same tightrope as well. And I was hoping we could dive into some of that stuff. Plus, Ix is here, and to hear the two of them go would have been really, really funny. But yeah, so but the conversations I've had with you have been solid. I understand why you hold to some of the the religious concepts that you hold to. But I like the fact that you're doing the work, that you don't see I don't know as a weakness, but as an opportunity. It's a position of strength. It's an opportunity to learn more, and that you're doing the work. So that's a good thing, that you're not afraid to ask questions. You're not afraid to learn more, even if what you might learn could fundamentally change your position. So I think that is literally the best place that you can be always, is always be able to say, yeah, I'm willing to put it all on the line and be like, wow, I was so wrong. And you're not just looking at the things that validate what you want to believe, what you hope are true, what you desire to be true. So.
Hmm. Yeah. It feels a lot more cut and dry with the naturalistic world for me. Just explaining things through naturalistic processes, but then I also have the supernaturalistic processes that I think about, that I don't even know which ones of those are correct, because as an ex-atheist, it all sounds like woo, but like I realized, or I came to the conclusion that I was wrong about God, so it makes me think, what else was I wrong about? Was I wrong about crystals? God forbid I was wrong about homeopathy. Like, it's hard to know what's correct when your worldview changes like that.
Yeah, adjusting to new information can be a challenge, and
Mhm.
you know, any of us who are atheists, who I think the vast majority of us who are atheists were brought up in some form of faith. I know some individuals who were never exposed to it when they were young, and they've been atheists their whole lives. But here in the West, pretty much, I think the vast majority of us were brought up in some religion, and that, you know, ultimately we found that these concepts are either incoherent when you cut them to their core, or they are just stopgap explanations that aren't backed by any kind of evidence whatsoever. And so trying to understand that, and trying to get, trying to get that across some people is really, really hard sometimes because, like we mentioned before, you challenge not only their beliefs, but also their very identity when it's predicated upon these concepts. But that's part of the struggle. You know, that's part of the difficulty in that.
Mhm.
So what about you? As far as your journey goes, because I know you stated that you were an atheist in the past, that you did not believe in the existence of a god or gods as they are understood to be. And what remind me again, what was it that changed your mind? What was it that made you into a Christian?
Baha'i. But I just made a prayer one night to help solve some of my problems, and like I got an immediate answer like that night, and that wasn't really the one thing that convinced me. Like it had been a slow process before then to that point where I could just ask. I called it the mysterious force of the universe, and I asked it for help, and I got the answer. Like, still struggle, but I feel like my path is laid better in front of me than it was before.
And and you acknowledge that it's possible that answer could have come from you.
I acknowledge that it could have been a coincidence, but it was an outside event happening to me. Like, it wasn't like me answering the question. It was like something happening to me that night.
I was going to say, now I'm interested, though. I know Ix is about to ask you a question, but...
We don't really need to know all the details. Like, it would be a fun story, but the two questions are, do you know what the reticular activated system does in the brain in terms of how you perceive things if you're expecting them? And the second question is, do you know what the clustering illusion is and why it appears that things align exactly the way that we think is significant, when if you look at the data set as a whole, there's going to be actually no trend like the one that we're only looking at a tiny subset of the data.
Yeah, I haven't heard of either of those things.
The reticular activated system, which is what drives pareidolia, basically. People think things are a certain way because they perceive patterns. But a lot of these are just false positives driven by our ability to see patterns everywhere. Because reticular, like if I look at a car to buy, and then I go driving, every car on the road that has anything like the qualities I'm thinking about is going to be noticeable. Whereas the day before, when I wasn't looking for that type of car, they would just drive by and they wouldn't even exist, right? Nothing about them would cause me to take the slightest notice. But now, if I were to say, you know what, I said, I want to find this kind of car, and then I went and I found it right away. It was amazing, right? I had a guy tell me that he found an apartment because he prayed. And I asked him, okay, how many apartments did you look at? And he was like, 29. But I prayed the day before I found the one that I needed. And I'm like, okay, so your batting average is 1 in 30, okay? But you think that it is efficacious because you happened to pray the night before the deadline where you're going to get kicked out of your house and you needed a place, and it was like the perfect timing. But to him, that made it more significant, right? Like he wasn't thinking my success rate is 1 in 30, which is not a great success rate for looking for places. He's thinking, when I needed it and I was desperate and I prayed, then I got it, right? The clustering illusion is so intense for people. It's very similar to the gambler's fallacy and other sort of cognitive distortions that people have about how probability works and how what's in front of them is just meant to be and so on. That I used to believe in this stuff myself. I was a strong believer that things in my life were just so good and were just so lining up that it must be some kind of plan or force in the universe. And when I realized that I could explain every one of those things by the fact that, like, I lived in a place where people all had that sort of characteristic in common, like, there was nothing actually that out of the ordinary about any of the things that happened, except that I wasn't thinking about the data set as a whole. I was just seeing an anecdotal piece of evidence in front of me and then drawing, like, extremely hasty conclusions.
And if I could just add on that not only can you build coincidences just like Ix was saying, but you can also have the feeling of a coincidence without it actually being one. And so the example that I will use, because I have to say this once a podcast contractually, is that I have epilepsy. I have it within the temporal lobe. And the weird thing about temporal lobe epilepsy is that the onset of a seizure is deja vu, which is a very weird feeling. And yet this sort of very this was happening before type of moment, I now can tie it to something very specific. And so that's not going to be the same for everything. However, I would love also to know what that coincidence is, because that is often what we're looking at, is that something happened, another something happened, and it's the agent that is really making the connection when the phenomenon, if they were looked at maybe more objectively, really had nothing to do. The amount of ice cream going up during a cold season or a warm season, maybe we can draw that towards, and it may not have a supernatural effect. So that's a lot, but yeah.
I think ultimately, I think first, I think you and I have discussed this before. It's all about, you're at a moment and you're at a point in your life where you posed a question to a particular target in your mind. Okay, so given that you posed a question to a particular target, implies that the target is there, that you believe the target is there, or at least the possibility exists that the target is there, and that you can possibly get an answer. So there's an expectation there. This also lends itself to the placebo effect. Okay, there's an expectation effect. Okay, so even if the expectation is small, the reality is you would really like an answer. So you actually inform your own expectation through your desperation or your desire to get an answer. And when you see something like a pattern, like Ix was bringing up, when you see these things and they seem to lend themselves towards an answer that you would like, or an answer you think makes sense, you tend to ultimately say that answer occurred because of this. When in actuality, you created the circumstances yourself to supply an answer that you wanted. So even just by asking the question, you've already set the stage to fulfill your own kind of desire. So that's where we kind of and to recognize that possibility. That's when I ask you. So that's when I ask you, when you ask the question, is it possible that the answer came from you and not from something external to you, giving you the answer in whatever way it did, through whatever pattern in your environment that you recognize, that you kind of fulfilled your own desire by expecting it to be fulfilled and looking for an answer that you wanted over other answers, and then using the environment, patterns that you recognized, to confirm what you already hoped would be the case. And it's unfortunately, the term that's often thrown around there is a level of self-deception, because it often is. Like, human beings are really, really prone to that. I mean, we make type 1 and type 2 errors all the time. Pareidolia, apophenia, a number of things where we derive meaning from the patterns we see that confirm what we already expect, or what we're anticipating, or what we're expecting to occur, or what we hope to be the case. And so that's one thing that when I learned about that, I learned how to step back and take myself out of the equation and say, okay, if this, then this, without my particular frame of reference, and try to look at it as objectively as possible. And recognize that I have to make sure that I am not imposing my expectations, my observer bias, onto what I am interpreting. And that is really, really hard to do. It takes a lot of practice. It takes time to get out of that habit, because it's a bad habit to be into. Because then it leads to the next thing. Because the you do it once, and then it becomes easier to do it with something else. This is how you get from the basic tenets of, oh, there's a creating and or there's this intentionality behind the universe. And unfortunately, it is a pretty slippery slope that can lead to things like crystals have healing power and homeopathy is more than just water.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that's where that those irrational beliefs, because like my whole channel is, irrational beliefs often lead to irrational behaviors. You start with one, the next one becomes easier.
Mm-hmm.
And then the one from there. And it's a progressive until eventually you get like people who are like, I'm spiritual but unaffiliated, all the way to I believe all the woo. You know? Crystals and peyote and DMT and, you know, all the way to, Lyme disease was a biological weapon developed during World War II, all the way to, the Montauk Monster is an interdimensional thing that came out via the Montauk Project. Shit like that. It goes like all the way to those extremes. So I've always perceived you have the willingness to question and gain more information and more insight, which is brilliant, and to engage in these conversations. So like I said, I still think you're in the best place.
Yeah. I think it is definitely tough when you go out and try and confirm these things, and the fact that you're going out and trying to confirm them could affect them actually appearing, because you're looking for them to appear, and right. It just becomes a confirmation bias. But like with some of the stuff that happened to me, like I wasn't even looking for it. Like I knew about the phenomena, but like when it was happening to me, like I wasn't thinking about trying to find it. It just kind of happened to me.
Find God?
I mean, not really God in that case, just like spiritual stuff that I'd heard about, like just even on this server.
Would you be able to give an example?
I mean, it feels, I can't think of the word, incredulous, even talking about it, but I guess one of the things that I guess I'll disclose, I was just in the religion server one of the nights, and these two people were egging each other on. One of them was like, I know you're a part of this secret satanic cult, or like this secret satanic order. He was like, dude, stop talking about this. And eventually he just gets him to talk about it, and they say, oh, they're going to summon a demon. And
badass.
What?
Oh, I just said badass.
Oh, yeah. So I was like, I don't want you summoning a demon on the server. So I just started chanting on my mala, and because I didn't know what else to do, I thought maybe that would interrupt them from doing it. But they mute me, so they can't really. So my mantra can't really do anything, and they say that they summon it. And the guy, he sends me the little glyph that he used. He sent me the name of the demon. He sent me a picture of it. He sent me the incantation.
Can I just pause for 1 second?
Uh-huh.
Because I'm very sympathetic. Because you were unsuccessful in your chant, it does seem like they were indeed successful in summoning a demon.
I don't know. I don't know how it works, but like at the very least, they seemed very convinced that they did it. I'm like, you didn't actually summon it, and like they were like, yes, you did, or yes, we did. And
well, I mean, the people at in the Heaven's Gate cult believe that they were going to ride on a comet before they self-castrated and unsubscribed from the Life Channel. So I mean, people could believe all sorts of things, and if you're think of the level of that, the expectation that a thing will be successful. And then you wind up creating the circumstances that validate what you already expect to happen. It happens all the time, And then you throw in the pageantry and the theater of big religious movements. You get like religious ecstasy, playing music, incantations, repetitive behaviors. All of these things lend themselves to coordinating human behavior into a particular, especially when everybody believes the same thing, and you can wind up convincing people that they saw crap or experienced crap that they really didn't, but they're just interpreting specific phenomena as being something else that it is.
Can I also give hope in that Bob Larson, he is an evangelical who will basically tell you if you give him more money that eventually God will give you more money, but he has this method where you start to send emojis into chat, and these specific emojis actually fight demons. And I just have to say that if your ass gets taken down by emojis, maybe the demons aren't that powerful.
Yeah. Whether or not like they were just messing with me, or like it was just two people who believed in this thing just chanting at each other, and there was not actually any actual effect.
Right.
Do
you believe that demons exist, Reverse?
I don't know. I'd like to believe that they don't. But like when I was falling asleep that night, like I could feel like something like causing like electric shocks throughout my body while I was trying to fall asleep.
Common phenomena.
Yeah. I've never felt it to such that extreme extent, though.
It's a result of your sympathetic nerve. I've heard of it before, and it's actually quite common, and we understand the mechanism behind it. So it's a physiological thing. It has to do with how your sympathetic nervous system is interpreting stimuli from the outside, and it happens on occasion. Doesn't happen all the time. Some people are more prone to it than others. Some people never feel it, but it is an understood phenomena that's been.
Yeah. I guess it just seems so weird that thinking that a demon was inside me, like it caused that to happen in ways that I didn't know that my body could react. Like it was like going outward from my spine. I could feel like the energy like spasming around there and like going outwards.
Yeah, I was gonna ask how it manifested, like, because if it took over you and you had a goatee and you did more evil, kinky things, that would have been interesting too. But okay, that one also worked.
See, it's interesting when people talk about things like demons and such, and it kind of falls down. It kind of falls down on itself, because ostensibly you have to look like what exactly is being categorized as a demon. What is a demon? What is the purpose of a demon? What is the demon? What would be a demon's goal? Stuff like that. And you think about it as like, well, if the demon's goal is ultimately to spread the disinformation, or just to spread information that either delegitimizes the other side. So if we're talking Christianity, you've got, God and angels, you've got Satan and demons. Okay, well, what is their purpose? What would be the purpose of a demon possessing a human being? Well, I mean, the actions that they partake in would be to spread, evil or whatever like this. But the problem is that when supposedly a demonic possession takes place, that ultimately the possession has the opposite effect of what the demon's trying to do. Because to Christians who fully expect the demonic possession takes place, all that does is confirm their faith and make their position stronger, because they interpret it, they expect it to happen, they think they see it happen, and then it just re-entrenches them. It entrenches them even farther because it's confirming what they already believe.
Mhm.
So ultimately, the act of demonic possession, in order to take people away from the faith or to harm the faith, is self-defeating, because the act confirms what they're already believing and what they expect. So it confirms their faith. So it's antithetical. The reality would be if a demon possessed a human being and then utilized its vast knowledge of human experience and philosophy and science and all this other stuff to pose the best and most stringent arguments that are backed by evidence against God, against the God concept. The problem is, if the God concept is ultimately what is true, the demon would also know that, and it would know that any line of reasoning would lead to the God. Because the demon knows it's true. The demon doesn't believe that God exists. The demon knows God exists. So ultimately, the demon is lying. And if there is a lie or a deception there, that can eventually be sussed out through methodology. So ultimately, a demon possessing somebody just to use appropriate argumentation or to point out logical fallacies, that thing knows it will ultimately fail because it all leads to God anyway, which ultimately makes it self-defeating. So the concept of demonic possession is in itself absolutely ridiculous because it's doing exactly what the other side wants them to do. So it would actually behoove Satan to not have demons possess anyone, because then that would say that what the Christians are expecting to happen never actually happens, which reduces the credibility of their claim.
Mhm.
So if Christianity were true and logically consistent, then no one would ever be possessed by a demon. Ever, because Satan and the demons by extension themselves would know that possessing people only gives more credibility to the thing they're fighting against.
Mhm. Yeah. I don't know exactly what they were thinking when they were doing that, but I don't think it was to make me disbelieve. I think it was to like put some bad energy on me, and
Or yeah, like they think that they think or they believe that you think this is a possibility, and they're literally just, for lack of a better term or lack of a better phrase, they're just fucking with you.
Yeah, I was gonna
Because
go. It is
yeah.
the internet. There's always just the role
Yeah.
of troll.
They're
mhm.
just fucking with you. It's like, here's a guy who believes a thing, and we're going to use that because we have knowledge of that thing, and we're going to literally fuck with you because you believe that, because you've been convinced this thing is true. And so there's just that. They know that demons don't exist. They know that energy, like the energy that things, it just does not exist. They know that the reality of you're only affected by that which you allow to affect you. And that if you're prone to certain ideas, then you will find some things offensive by correlation. So they're just going to poke at those things to watch you squirm, knowing full well that none of it is real. And I've run into a lot of atheists that would do that as well. They'll poke at Christians and they'll be like, think of the relationship between the Satanic Temple and Christianity today.
Mhm.
The Satanic Temple does not believe that Satan exists.
Yeah.
Okay, they don't believe that any of that has any merit. Okay, essentially, they're humanists with dogma, is what it is. Okay, but they will throw down hard on the tenets of Satanism because they know it freaks the Christians out and
Mhm.
makes them squirm. It's pretty much it. You could say there are people who have called it a trolling, a professional trolling, at a federally backed level, but only as an effort to reinforce our Constitution and the separation of church and state. That what goes for you also goes for us. So that the Christians can't argue for a thing and say it applies to them without it also applying to all the religions that they hate. It doesn't work that way. So then they use that to their advantage. So because it's in our system, it's all or nothing. Nobody gets preferential treatment. It's all, unless you're crazy rich, but it's all or nothing. So yeah, there are people who will take advantage of that.
Yeah, I had someone who was there try and explain that they were basically just trolling me and that's what she said they told her. But it's just weird. Like,
It
they were
sounds like a very, very wise lady.
maybe. I don't know. It's just weird because, like I said, they sent me the little sigils that they use, and it's from like the Lesser Key of Solomon. It seemed like a super elaborate troll that just came out of nowhere. It was really spontaneous.
Right.
Like they didn't know that I believed until I started chanting on my mala.
Because you believe that your mala has power.
Yeah.
But in reality, the only power it has is the power that you've given it.
Mm-hmm. But they also said that like the more power I give it, the more that it manifests. So it's a question if it's like just this completely materialistic thing where I'm giving it power, so it just affects me in
Very specifically
psychosomatic way, or if there's actually something behind it. And you'd say, oh, it's just this completely naturalistic process
I
where
think this was the sigil they were showing him.
I'm just going out to seek to confirm it, and me confirming it just, even though it's not true, the idea gets stronger and stronger until I believe it more and more. And yeah, that would be the simpler answer, but I don't know. Just the stuff that I seen, like at well, he's not a friend anymore, but he
But I have
was
to ask
supposedly
you, are you acting a little bit more devilish?
I feel like my negative qualities have been increased in terms of like just I can't get shit done lately. I can't focus. I can't get anything done when like I'm on a time crunch to figure stuff out in my life.
I don't want to promote drug use, but that may mean the demons can be defeated with Adderall.
I'll give you my tech. Make a to-do list. That's how I keep my shit straight, because I have lots of stuff going on in my in my daily life. Like almost every day of my week is occupied by something that I have to do. So whether it's for my podcast or my personal channel or the stuff that or the whatever's going on or traveling that I do, like almost every single day, or the film productions that I'm on or whatever. Okay, I'm always busy. So plus I have to leave time for taking care of my dogs, taking care of the house, time for the gym, and and all kinds of stuff. So I'm busy all the time, and sometimes I get analysis paralysis myself. It's like, what do I do first? What do I do like this? Really simple. Here's your best weapon to fight off the demon. Make a to-do list. Just make a list of everything that needs to be done for that day, and just start tackling that thing one at a time. Once you build that behavior, once you build that habit, you make that habitual, make that to-do list, tackle it once at a time. Your problems become really, really, I would say your problems become much more manageable. You realize that they're not as big as you think they are, because now you have it listed out. That compartmentalizes it. This is the list of what must be done. Okay? And from that list, you can prioritize. Say, this is the most important thing on the list. Take care of it. Done. Move on to the next. And then by the time you're done with the day, you've got virtually everything on your list, if not all of it done. Then you just repeat for the next day. Or you can do it for a week, or you can do it for a month, or whatever works for you. But it's all about time management, compartmentalization. That's all it is. Sometimes you get too much information and you can get an analysis paralysis over it because there's like so much to do. Well, compartmentalize it. Write it down. What's individual thing? And guess what? For me, it works every time. May work for you. That's my suggestion. Or you can do what Amy said. Adderall.
Adderall is pretty good for that. I bought a planner like a couple months back, and then I just never used it. So
that's
I need
also
to
a
pull that out.
that's also what happened to get. Like if you look at, because it was my wife who began to recognize, because I was trying to keep everything in my head. It was my wife who's like, you need a planner and you need to use it. And so now I'm on my 4th one. And so like if you look, like every single thing, like if you were to look at my planners, insane. Like my calendars are completely filled. My calendars are filled, and the pages with notes are like just like all over. And so these are going to be like a testament to the work that I do once I'm all done with all this stuff. So, but yeah, you know, it's all about time management and compartmentalization is pretty much what it is. All right. We got about 5 minutes left before 2:00. Typically, 2 is the latest we typically tend to run this. I think we got time for maybe one more person. I want to see if anybody else in the audience here wants to put their hands up. But thank you very much, Reverse, for the chat. I'm glad we finally got you up to have a conversation. Like I said, I think you're in a good place. Keep searching, keep questioning. Don't be afraid to question. I don't think you are, and just maintain that momentum. You know, I understand you believe the things that, and I understand why you believe them. But yeah, keep doing the work, because from what I've seen, you're not afraid of it. So keep tackling it. Cool. Awesome.
All right. Yeah, I got to get lunch anyways. Nice talking to you guys.
Always a pleasure, Reverse. Have a good one.
Nice talking to you.
He's a good dude. All right, we got time for one more before we close this thing down. We're trying to make this quick. I see one person Jesse's got their hand up. Jesse. Let's see if we're gonna wrap this up with this. Jesse, how you doing?
And this is amazing.
Good.
My name's actually Walter White. I couldn't help it. I'm sorry. Well, you're probably a lovely human being.
Yeah, I am very much. So what do I believe in? Well, I believe in, yes, Christianity, but that's not like my main thing. I believe in just life in general on Gengi.
So would you say that you're a Christian?
Yeah.
And if I may, just for clarification for our understanding, would you say you're a particular denomination or non-denomination?
Non-denomination. I'm non-binary and that shit.
So, okay. So it's just kind of like, would you say spiritual but unaffiliated, or you're definitely a non-denominational Christian?
I'm definitely a non-denominational Christian.
Okay. So that implies kind of like, like a view of the Bible and such. So I'm kind of curious. I'll just start out. I mean, we'll start out really simply. Like, if you're a Christian, non-denominational or otherwise, you believe that a God exists. So I'm curious, why do you believe that a God exists? What evidence do you have that states this thing exists?
There are multiple. Because before you just answer, I just want to go, because I want to speak for, I believe, JL and myself. We, all three of us right now, are on board with We Like Life. And so that one, I can definitely grant you. And then what he said, let's get to God.
So, yeah, the Bible, but I don't want to say that because you're going to be like, oh, there's some parts of the Bible that you're going to see like, oh, that's unworthy.
I would just say that believing the Bible is true just presupposes that the God exists. So it ultimately all comes back to, why do you believe a God exists? That's
I believe it because there's multiple, because I had spiritual encounters with that shit.
In the book?
No.
In real life, tell us more.
Okay, you've had spiritual encounters. Yeah, yes, definitely tell us more.
In multiple times, and it's not like, oh, it's not going to be eye-opening. He does things in like little ways.
Probably not.
And don't think about God as like this big ultimate power. Nah, he's just like a father figure type beat. Because one time I was so down on my luck, and I was just laying in my room, and it was time for me to go to bed. And then all of a sudden I started to talk to him, and then as I gradually went there, I started to be more happy, and I started laughing and having a whole conversation with him and shit. And you're gonna be like, oh, that's crazy because you guys pray, but like, nah, it's like, it's like an invisible like best friend type shit.
If I could just point out though, that I'm actually a little bit more upset with that type of father figure. I just want to say that if you were supposed to go to bed, maybe he should have promoted that more. But you know, we continue on.
No. It's kind of like that, but he's not like your human father figure. He lets
He's the
you
cool
do what
father
you want.
figure.
Yeah, he's a cool father figure. Like,
Okay.
on God.
Okay, so obviously when you're talking about like the idea of a father figure, this conceptualization of the Christian God. Okay, now there's two ways we can go about this. We can say, I can ask, why do you believe that this thing has this particular relationship with you and not the same relationship with more desperate people?
Because the people who are, well, okay, here's the thing, right? If you don't believe in that shit or have faith in that shit, and you just believe like, oh, God they don't exist, God don't even answer my prayers, nah.
No, that's not a reason. I wouldn't. That's not obviously. That's not a reason to not believe in like. But the idea is that you're proposing a concept of a God that is willing to have a personal relationship with you that you describe as having like a cool dad in your life.
Yeah. So here's the thing.
But what about the people that live on this earth that have a conceptualization of God, but don't even have the wherewithal to like question these things and are living in more desperate scenarios than you do, but God never answers them or is not a cool dad for them.
How do you know that that's true? How do you know
children that are abused to death?
How do you God has a plan. God literally has a plan. And but you're thinking about like, oh, the right now. But do you think that God never answers their prayers? No. Because he has a plan for them. It's not going to be like in an instant. You're going to be like, oh, and you don't know if it's going to be a cool dad with them, because they might feel that. They might feel that it's a cool dad with them.
All right, but you recognize the implication of what you're stating there, right?
No.
The implication is that the horrifying suffering of some human beings is justified.
It's not justified.
Well, you just said that your God may have a plan. Has a plan, and by virtue of your God having a plan where that individual's horrific suffering is necessary, therefore it is justified.
It's not necessary.
So why does it happen?
But it takes time, because the earth is a horrible place. God, it's hard to explain, dog.
Listen, JL,
it's hard, bro.
Yeah,
I'm not good.
It may be true that there are children in countries around the world that right now are not only starving, but have different diseases that will soon bring about their demise. However, we had a Sky Daddy that did let us stay up past bedtime. And so
okay.
Sending love.
There's problems with that. And it also that's one way we could, okay? That's one direction we could go. And the other direction is that, I mean, actually there's a number of directions we can go here. The other direction is that the implication of what you're asserting is that this life that we currently live in is ostensibly valueless. Because it's nothing more than a way station or even a doormat into this next experience.
Not really.
It does because if the God exists and people die, where do those people go when they die?
They go to
$10 on the happy place.
So by the heaven or hell, right?
I'm not good at this shit. I'm not good at debating. I give up. You won. I can't do this shit. I was feeling like pressure like the whole way through, and I couldn't do this shit. I was trying to be like, oh, I want to say some random shit, but nah, you're scary. I'm not gonna stop believing, but I'm gonna still be like,
well, it's not a matter of whether or not you stop believing. It's that whether or not you are willing to ask questions. That's the point. Is can you look at what you believe and what is entailed by what you believe, and follow those entailments to their logical conclusion. Okay? So not only what you believe, but the implications. Okay? What does this say about the larger picture? And if you'll notice, a lot of those happy little, smiley rainbow and puppy things that are at the very, very forefront that religion sells itself on, when you follow them to the logical conclusions, they turn out to be terrifying and horrific.
It's not really goody good two shoes. It's not all that, really.
Well, the idea that God has a plan, everything will work out, the bad things that happen to good, bad things happen to good people, but there will justice, and I don't have to worry, and all I have to do is believe, and I don't have to do any work.
That's not just it. It's not just like, oh, you had to believe. It's more to it, but I just don't know how to explain it well enough that I can say like, okay, because I'm not no debater, bro. I can't do that shit. But there's more to it than just, oh, you gotta believe. It's more to it.
And let me offer the olive branch, Jesse. I know I make a lot of jokes, and I know. The comparison, I guess what I was trying to just illustrate is that you have such a warm, happy memory, which is fantastic. And we're not trying to take that away from you. We're just trying to show maybe a little bit of the problem of evil, which is you had a great experience. But why do so many bad experiences happen to good people?
Especially when those people believe as much, if not harder than you do.
I don't think I don't know. It's hard to say. I'm not good with this shit. On God. No.
That's really okay. That's quite all right. We've posed some I think some good thoughts here, or some good thoughts and responses here. So definitely, as Aaron Reese in my live chat stated, debater or no, you should still be introspective. And to follow and I would say, going all the way back to Socrates, follow the evidence where it leads. Don't be afraid to follow that. We have to follow the evidence. Or technically, Socrates said, follow the argument where, okay? But follow the evidence, Where does it go? Regardless of how you feel about it. Because sometimes the evidence goes places that you may not like. Okay? But all you can do is keep asking questions and really start diving in. Start with what we thought here. Start with the implications of what does that imply on a grander scale.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Good. All right.
Okay. Thank you, bud. That was pretty quick. That was short and sweet. So I actually I want to bring up one more person, and then we're gonna call it. So because that one went
sounds good.
As I Killed Earl said in my that wasn't at all satisfying. So let's bring it up. Tanya, go ahead and come on up. We got you the invite.
Hello, how you guys doing?
Doing good.
This has been a hell of an experience, watching everyone come in. Richard he's Richard. But I love the guy, but sometimes what he believes in makes me scratch my head and be like, you're intelligent as fuck. Sorry, you're intelligent as hell. Why? How and why do you believe this?
I don't know if you're familiar with John C. Sanford.
No.
Okay, John C. Sanford is a geneticist, and he invented the gene gun, which was a revolutionary device that made targeted gene therapy. It basically kind of revolutionized the whole field of targeted gene therapy. Brilliant invention. Okay, which means that his understanding of genetics is, second to almost none. Okay, John C. Sanford, excellent geneticist. He also believes that the Earth is 6,000 years old. So it's kind of like solid in one area doesn't mean solid in all areas. So it's like, because John C. Sanford has gone to great lengths to publish shit about young Earth creationism.
Unfortunately,
humans and dinosaurs lived at the same time, and I'm like, well, hang on a sec. But genetics. It, but then he posits this thing called genetic entropy, which is really just a Christian an evangelical rebranding of error catastrophe. It's ridiculous, but I'm like, wow! But
I get this genetic gun. I need it to cure my albinism. Holy shit!
Like, it's so smart, but yet not. But then all of a sudden, it's kind of like, wow, Newton. Think about the things that Newton did. Look at all this amazing stuff.
Yeah, exactly. But he
and
believes in God and all that.
Well, don't forget. He drank mercury.
I
He
think
he believed alchemy. He believed in alchemy. So it's kind of like, what do we do?
And astrology, indeed.
And yeah, it's just kind of like, you look at the things like, wow, people strike gold. Oftentimes, someone will come along, it takes a lot of digging in the dirt to strike gold. Okay, but we can't just count the big hits as like, wow, you had this one big discovery, but you also believed that, this thing over here, which is fucking insane. So, but yeah.
I feel like maybe this is just me, but I feel like I'm like the only person who can't believe something unless it's logical to me. Like I know everybody believes something that makes sense to them. It may not make sense to other people. But for me, I feel like even if I do believe in something, I'm always questioning it to see whether it's actually logical. It actually makes sense. It's actually, you know what I mean? If it could help me understand this wondrous universe we live in, which I gotta tell you, I lived on this planet for like 39 years, and I may be an atheist, but I see nothing but beauty. I mean, yeah, there's the ugly side, obviously. People kill each other. There's animals trying to survive out there, but there's beauty in that also, because if that never happened, we wouldn't be here. Conflict is needed for survival and propagation of all species. Now, if we didn't, sorry, I have a stuttering problem. It gets kind of annoying.
It's okay. You're good.
Okay. I don't want to go too long. I know you guys want to go, eat, get something to drink, but if we didn't breed and kill and kill all the other hominids, I don't think we would be here right now. I mean, we probably would be here right now, but we wouldn't be in our current state. Now, is there a universe out there to where the edge falls, and and us can still live together and be how we are now, like quote unquote modern humans? I don't know. That's an interesting thought experiment. It's an interesting thought experiment.
Yeah, it can get interesting. It can. All right, bud. You got anything else for us today?
I could go in so many places, but if you guys want to leave, that's fine.
And I just want to point out that Tanya, you might sparkle. In fact, you may midnight.
I am sparkle. Yes,
I know.
All right, we appreciate it. Thank you very much.
But yeah, I just want to say you impressed me. From the way you've both of you have, actually, all three of you have. IX left, but yeah, sorry.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Really, really do. And of course, I do this all the time on my channel, and all kinds of various content that you can find there. And so definitely check that out. As a matter of fact, we'll go and move to that. So thank you again, Tanya. Really do appreciate that. I'm going to move you down to the audience.
All right.
So I appreciate that for coming up. All right. So I think with that, we're in a good place, and it's been going since 10 o'clock. It is now a little after 2 where I am. So Amy, tell them where they can find your stuff. Tell them how they can engage with your content. Give them all the plugs.
I will say, if there's one thing that I would like to do, it's give them plugs. And I want to thank everyone for joining us today. You can find myself and my co-host James W. at youtube.com/Amy Newman, as well as all of the lovely social media that we can have more lovely discussions about. But I want to say that I'm not sure that we got convinced by any of the theistic arguments that came by us today. I guess it's going to have to be next week, which means everyone's going to have to keep on showing up. I want to send love to Taco, who I know was out there, Ix, and of course, everyone who is both in my chat and JL Warren's chat. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, y'all.
Awesome, awesome. And of course, yes, you can find my stuff channel there, which is youtube.JL Warren or @JL Warren, where I do this stuff all the time, conversations with theists, and of course, make response content to various theistic claims, and talk about all manner of stuff. So if you like what you got here, then pop over there and you can check that out. Also, yes, I do want to throw out, thank you, I Killed Earl, who's in my live chat, says, I will be on Ride the Wavelength on May the 4th, be with you, which is coming up here really, really soon over on the channel at Ride the Wavelength. So check that out on YouTube. It's going to be a great show. Looking forward to that big time. And so, but yeah, follow us there. Now, I apologize if we weren't able, Mike, I see you got your hand up. The Stage of Reason, we do this every third Sunday of the month. If it becomes really, really popular, we may increase it. I may do it again, may do it twice a month. I don't know. But right now, once a month seems to be working really, really well. And we hope to see everybody again really soon. Definitely, if you have not, join the politics server. They're the ones that make all this possible. The link is in the description. And of course, if you're here, you're already here. But if you're listening to this out there and you're not a member of the politics server, come and hang out with us. You know, there's all kinds of discussions going on. You can find whatever floats your boat and, you know, have those conversations that you really, or just listen in to the great conversations we have there. But we hang out here, politics server. So it's in the description.
I'd be remiss. I just see that you've been tagging me, Vic Cobbler, if that's your name. But feel free to come on our next show. That's just a great reason to have a discussion with us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So thank you again, Mike. I hope we or you can hang out with one of the others because these typically go down every single Sunday. This particular Stage of Reason will be every third Sunday. And if you follow my channel, you'll be able to see the updates there and get notifications. So thank you. Thank you, Amy, for hanging out with me. This was a blast. And thank you to Ix, who I know had to depart. So thank you to Ix. And hopefully we'll see a great turnout on the next one. Cool.
It has been fun, JL. I hope that you have a fantastic rest of your week, because next week, that's when we're going to convert. I can feel it.
Absolutely. I'm fully expecting it. You know, I feel the energy amass in one particular direction. Exactly. It didn't happen at the eclipse, so I was really disappointed. I was expecting, like, you know, the moon to pass over the sun and that great hole in the sky suddenly appear, and then all of a sudden, like, you know, Christ would come out, like, you know, on a horse, be like, aha! But it didn't happen.
But we should have known, predictively, werewolves.
Right, you know, it should have been at least some partial transformations. All right, y'all. Have a great one. Check us out at JL Warren.
Bye. Mwah.
And we'll see you on the next one. Be safe. Be excellent to each other. And together we can bridge the divide.
All right, y'all. I am sending so much love out there. It has been fun. Don't have much to add except for I still have to do, I keep on saying I'm going to upload that AMA. We didn't have a lot of debating. However, it was a really good conversation, and I really liked the content that Taka was doing. And so I should post it up here. And so look forward to that and more stuff with James W. and myself. We're going to have a lot of fun. I see a lot of you out there, just like Goth and Sven and Mr. A and all of you wonderful people who have stuck around. I want to thank you all for, if you're enjoying the show, please don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe. All of our super chatters, our members, Patreon supporters, just the people who like hanging around. And if you're hate watching us, I know I actually watch some Christian Muslim channels just because I disagree with them. It's always good to stay up to date. However, there's lots of fantastic atheist shows out there. So if I'm going down, in fact, while I'm going down, let's just take a peek. Anybody live? A lot of good people are live. Both Phil Talk is live. Go check out his fantastic content. Leophilius is premiering something right now on his debate versus a flat earther, and The Line, who has the awesome Forrest and Eve, are up right now. Oh, and T-Jump's premiering something. There's a lot. Oh my goodness, ladies and gentlemen, just look at this fantastic content. I see Mark Reid posted something last night. So if you're looking for someone to go after here, then I am queer. I just love that word rhymes with here because you say the word here so often, and so it just makes for easy rhyming. Anyway, I love all of you, and I guess we'll see you all in the next episode of Skeptic Ball Z. If you say goodbye at the end, I'll say goodbye to you. We'll show it. If not, I just hope that you keep being awesome to each other, keep sending love, and we'll see you all on the next episode of Skeptic Ball Z.